A billionaire CEO runs secret psychological experiments on women to find a wife who won't betray him for money. 9 have failed his twisted tests. When humble diner waitress Nia becomes test subject number 10, the unthinkable happens. He falls desperately in love with her. She has no idea she's being manipulated until she discovers the soul-crushing truth that their entire relationship was a lie. You won't believe what happens when love collides with the ultimate deception. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Elias Monroe stood at the window of his penthouse, looking down at the city lights that stretched out before him like fallen stars. At 33, he had everything money could buy: a luxury apartment in the heart of the city, a fleet of sports cars, vacation homes on 3 continents, and a bank account with more zeros than most people would see in a lifetime. But as he swirled the whiskey in his crystal glass, his reflection in the window showed a handsome face hardened by mistrust. 2 years ago, his world had shattered when he discovered his fiancée, Vanessa, had been playing him all along. "Sir," said Raymond, his personal assistant, entering the room with a folder, "I've prepared the files on the next candidate, as you requested." Elias turned from the window and took the folder. "Thank you, Raymond. What's this one's story?" Raymond cleared his throat. Courtney Wells, 29, works in marketing, graduated from Dartmouth, comes from an upper-middle-class family in Connecticut. Elias flipped through the photos and information. Courtney was beautiful, with straight blonde hair and a practiced smile. He'd already arranged to accidentally meet her at a charity gala the following evening. "This will be number 9, Elias said, more to himself than to Raymond. "Yes, sir. And may I ask if any of the previous candidates have shown promise?" Elias's face darkened. "No, they all failed. Some faster than others, but they all failed." After Vanessa had left him at the altar, taking with her a small fortune in gifts and the engagement ring worth over $1 million, Elias had sworn he would never be deceived again. He had created a system, a series of tests, to find a woman who wanted him, not his money. So far he had secretly tested 8 women. Each one had been carefully selected and approached under different pretenses. None knew they were being evaluated as potential wives, and none had passed. "Are you sure this approach is healthy, sir?" Raymond ventured cautiously. Elias shot him a warning look. "I didn't ask for your opinion, Raymond. I asked for your discretion and your assistance. That's what I pay you for." "Of course, sir. I apologize. The car will be ready at 7 tomorrow," Elias said, dismissing him. After Raymond left, Elias sat down on his leather couch and spread out Courtney's file. He had a routine now. First, he would approach a woman with some pretext, a job offer, a charitable opportunity, sometimes just asking her out. Then, over the course of several weeks, he would subject her to a series of unspoken tests. Would she push for expensive gifts? Would she ask about his finances or try to access his accounts? Would she show interest in his life or just his lifestyle? Would she maintain the facade of interest even when he pretended to be going through financial difficulties? So far, every woman had failed spectacularly. Some lasted longer than others, but eventually all of them showed their true colors. Elias closed the file and finished his whiskey in one burning gulp. Maybe Courtney would be different, but he doubted it. The following evening, Elias stood in the glittering ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel, nursing a glass of champagne as he scanned the crowd. The Charity Gala was in full swing, with the city's elite dressed in their finest, writing checks for the children's hospital while sipping drinks that cost more than what many families made in a day. He spotted Courtney across the room, looking stunning in a silver gown that hugged her curves. As planned, Elias made his way toward the bar, timing it perfectly so they would arrive at the same moment. "Excuse me," he said, pretending to accidentally bump into her. Courtney turned, her practiced smile already in place. When she saw Elias, her eyes widened slightly, recognition flickering across her face. Of course, she knew who he was. Everyone in their circles did. "I'm so sorry," Elias said, flashing his most charming smile. "I should watch where I'm going." "No harm done," she replied, her voice as smooth as honey. "I'm Courtney Wells." "Elias Monroe." He extended his hand, which she took, holding it a moment longer than necessary. "I know who you are, Mr. Monroe. Your reputation precedes you. All good things, I hope," he said, already knowing how this dance would go. 2 hours later, they were sitting at a quiet table in the corner, champagne glasses empty, conversation flowing. Courtney laughed at all his jokes, touched his arm at all the right moments, and asked just enough questions about his business to seem interested without being too probing. By the end of the night, Elias had her number and a dinner date scheduled for the following week. As his driver took him home, Elias pulled out his phone and sent a text to Raymond. Begin phase 1 tomorrow. Background check, social media monitoring, the usual. Raymond's reply came quickly. Already on it, sir. The following week, Elias took Courtney to dinner at La Mer, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. As expected, she ordered the most expensive items on the menu without even glancing at the prices. During the third course, Elias excused himself to take a call and then returned with a troubled expression. Is everything okay? Courtney asked, setting down her fork. Just some business issues, Elias said vaguely. Nothing to worry about. You can talk to me about it, she offered, reaching across the table to touch his hand. I'm a good listener. Elias hesitated, then sighed. It's just, I might be facing some financial setbacks. A deal I was counting on fell through. It was a lie, of course. The first test. He watched Courtney's face carefully, noting the fleeting look of concern that crossed her features before she composed herself. I'm sorry to hear that, she said, but I'm sure things will work out. You're Elias Monroe, after all. Her words were supportive, but Elias caught the subtle shift in her demeanor. Her eyes darted around the expensive restaurant, as if suddenly questioning whether he could afford it. By the time dessert arrived, Courtney was already making excuses about an early morning meeting the next day. As he paid the bill, with cash, another part of the test, Elias knew she had already failed, but he would continue the charade a little longer, just to be sure. 3 dates later, his suspicions were confirmed. When Elias mentioned he might need to sell one of his vacation homes, Courtney suddenly remembered a family emergency that required her immediate attention. She never called again. Candidate 9 has been eliminated, Elias told Raymond the following morning in his office. Prepare the file for candidate 10. Raymond hesitated. Sir, if I may, perhaps it's time to reconsider this approach. It seems to be taking a toll on you. Elias glared at him. The approach is fine, the women are the problem. Of course, sir, Raymond said, backing down. I'll prepare the next file. But Raymond didn't move toward the door. Instead, he stood there, fidgeting with his tablet. What is it? Elias asked impatiently. It's just, we've gone through all the pre-selected candidates, the usual channels, charity boards, society events, corporate circles. We've exhausted them. Elias waved his hand dismissively. Then find someone new. Outside our usual circles, someone different. Raymond nodded and left, closing the door softly behind him. Alone again, Elias turned back to his computer. 9 women, 9 failures. Was he being too harsh? Too suspicious? No, he told himself. He was being cautious, practical. He wouldn't let another Vanessa into his life. The memory of their relationship still stung. Vanessa had been perfect, or so he thought. Beautiful, charming, seemingly kind. He had fallen hard and fast, proposing after just 6 months. The wedding was planned, the guests invited. And then, the night before the ceremony, he had overheard her on the phone with a friend, laughing about how she had landed the big fish, and how she couldn't wait to cash in. The revelation had frozen something inside him. He had confronted her, of course, the tears, the denials, the accusations that he was paranoid. But in the end, she had taken what she could and left. Never again, he had promised himself. Never again would he be fooled. 2 days later, Elias found himself in an unfamiliar part of the city. His car had broken down, a rare occurrence for his meticulously maintained Bentley, and the nearest open establishment was a small diner called Maggie's Place. It was nearly midnight and the diner was mostly empty. A bell jingled as Elias pushed open the door, feeling distinctly out of place in his tailored suit. The vinyl booths were worn, the linoleum floor scuffed, but everything was clean and the smell of coffee and pie was surprisingly inviting. Sit anywhere you like, hun, called a middle-aged waitress from behind the counter. Be with you in a minute. Elias slid into a booth by the window and watched as his driver spoke with the tow truck operator outside. He took out his phone to call Raymond, but the battery was dead. Perfect. Just perfect. Can I get you something to drink while you decide? Elias looked up to see not the older waitress, but a young woman standing at his table with a coffee pot in hand. She wore the same uniform as the other waitress, a light blue dress with a white apron, but somehow she made it look different. She was beautiful, but not in the polished, artificial way of the women he usually encountered. Her beauty was natural, unadorned. Her dark skin glowed under the diner's fluorescent lights, and her curly hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, warm, brown, and incredibly kind. "Just coffee, Black," he said, surprised by the roughness in his voice. She smiled and poured the coffee with practiced ease. "Rough night?" she asked, nodding toward the window where his car was being hooked up to the tow truck. "You could say that," Elias replied, taking a sip of the coffee. It was surprisingly good. "Well, car trouble is never fun, but at least you found your way to the best pie in the city," she said with a genuine smile. "I'm Nia, by the way. Let me know if you need anything else." As she walked away, Elias found himself watching her. There was something about her, something different. She moved around the diner with quiet confidence, stopping to chat with an elderly man sitting alone at the counter, making him laugh with whatever she was saying. When she returned to take his order, Elias found himself asking, "What would you recommend?" "Depends on what you're in the mood for," Nia replied. "Our apple pie is famous, but personally I think the blueberry is even better. And if you're hungry for something more substantial, you can't go wrong with Maggie's meatloaf special." There was no practiced flirtation in her voice, no recognition of who he was. It was refreshing. "I'll try the blueberry pie," he said. "And maybe the meatloaf too." Nia nodded and jotted down his order. "Coming right up." While he waited, Elias observed her interactions with the few other customers in the diner. She seemed to know them all by name, asking about family members and remembering details about their lives. With the elderly man at the counter, she was especially attentive, making sure his coffee cup was always full and slipping him an extra piece of pie on the house. When she brought Elias his food, he couldn't help but ask, "Do you know all your customers this well?" Nia smiled. "Most of the late-night regulars, yeah. They're like family after a while." "Even him?" Elias nodded toward the old man. "Mr. Jenkins? Especially him. He's been coming here every night since his wife passed. I think he gets lonely in that big house by himself." She looked at Elias curiously. "What about you? What brings a guy in a suit like that to Maggie's at midnight?" Elias gestured toward the window. "Car trouble. And a dead phone." "Bad luck," Nia said sympathetically. "But lucky for us, I guess. We don't get many customers in suits around here." There was no judgment in her voice, just a simple observation. Elias found himself smiling, a real smile, not the practiced one he used at business meetings and charity galas. "The pie is excellent," he said, taking another bite. "You were right. I usually am," she replied with a wink before moving on to check on her other customers. By the time Elias had finished his meal, the tow truck had taken his car and his driver had arranged for a car service to take him home. He paid his bill, the total amount less than what he typically tipped at his usual restaurants, and left a generous tip for Nia. As he was about to leave, he turned back on impulse. "What nights do you work here?" Nia looked surprised by the question. "Tuesdays through Saturdays, usually the late shift." Elias nodded. "The pie really was excellent. I might have to come back." She smiled that genuine smile again. "We'll be here." The next morning, Elias couldn't stop thinking about the diner and the waitress with the kind eyes. He found himself calling Raymond into his office. "I need you to find out everything you can about a waitress named Nia, who works at Maggie's Place Diner on Westbrook Avenue." Raymond raised an eyebrow but knew better than to question his boss. "May I ask why, sir?" Elias hesitated. "Why indeed? She might be interesting for our project." Understanding dawned on Raymond's face. "Ah, candidate number 10. Possibly. Just get me the information." 2 days later, Raymond placed a file on Elias's desk. "Nia Watkins, sir, 27 years old, works 2 jobs, days at a daycare center and nights at the diner. Lives in a small apartment in the east side of the city. No criminal record. Some financial struggles, but nothing unusual for someone of her economic status." Elias opened the file and saw a photo of Nia, presumably taken from her social media. She was smiling, her arm around an elderly woman who shared her features. "That's her grandmother," Raymond explained. "Raised Nia after her mother disappeared when she was 12. The grandmother passed away 3 years ago." Elias flipped through the rest of the file. Nia had been in foster care briefly after her grandmother became too ill to care for her. She had started college on a scholarship, but had to drop out when money got tight. She was saving up to go back and finish her degree in early childhood education. "She volunteers at a homeless shelter on Sundays," Raymond continued, "and according to her social media, she enjoys reading, cooking, and photography, though she can't afford a proper camera, just uses her phone." Elias stared at the file for a long moment. Nia Watkins was about as far from his usual type as one could get. She wasn't from his world. She had no connections, no prestigious background, but there was something about her. "Set it up," he decided suddenly. The usual approach won't work here. I'll need to offer her a job. Raymond frowned. A job, sir? What kind of job? Personal assistant, or maybe something at the foundation, something that would seem like a great opportunity. But, sir, she has no qualifications for— Figure it out, Raymond, Elias cut him off. That's what I pay you for. The following Tuesday, Elias returned to Maggie's place. It was just as quiet as before, with only a few customers scattered around the diner. Nia was there, moving between tables with the same quiet grace he had noticed before. When she saw him, recognition flickered across her face, followed by a smile. Well, look who's back. Car trouble again. Elias smiled. No, just a craving for that blueberry pie. Nia led him to a booth and poured him a cup of coffee without asking. Pie and coffee coming right up. When she returned with his order, Elias cleared his throat. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. Nia raised an eyebrow. Oh? I'm Elias Monroe, he said, extending his hand. She shook it, looking amused. I remember. The guy with the fancy car and the suit. I own Monroe Enterprises, he continued, waiting for the usual reaction. The widening of eyes, the sudden shift in demeanor that came when people realized how wealthy he was. But Nia just nodded. Okay, and? Elias blinked, taken aback by her lack of reaction. Did she not know who he was? Or did she simply not care? And I'm looking for a personal assistant, he said, recovering quickly. Someone organized, discreet, good with people. Raymond, my current assistant, is being promoted, and I need someone to replace him. Now Nia did look surprised. And you're telling me this because I'd like to offer you the job. Nia stared at him for a long moment, then laughed. Is this some kind of joke? Not at all, Elias said seriously. I'm always on the lookout for talented people, and I'm a good judge of character. You don't even know me, Nia pointed out, and I don't have any experience as a personal assistant. You're good with people. I've seen how you interact with your customers, and you're organized, the way you handle multiple orders. Remember everyone's preferences. Those are skills that can't be taught. Nia glanced around the diner, then back at Elias. I need to check on my other tables, but we can talk more when I take my break in about 20 minutes. If you're serious. I'm serious, Elias assured her. True to her word, Nia returned 20 minutes later, sliding into the booth across from him after hanging her apron behind the counter. Okay, Mr. Monroe, tell me more about this job offer. Elias outlined the position, a combination of scheduling, correspondence, and general administrative tasks. The salary he mentioned was 3 times what she was currently making at both her jobs combined. Nia listened quietly, her expression thoughtful. When he finished, she tilted her head. Can I ask you something, Mr. Monroe? Of course. Why me, really? There must be hundreds of qualified people who would jump at this opportunity. People with degrees, experience, connections. Why walk into a diner and offer it to a waitress you've met exactly once? It was a fair question, and not one Elias had expected. Most people would have jumped at the offer without questioning it. I told you, I'm a good judge of character, he said. And sometimes the right person for a job isn't the one with the most impressive resume. Nia studied him for a long moment, as if trying to see past his practiced charm to what lay beneath. I'd need to give notice at both my jobs. 2 weeks. Of course. And I'd want something in writing. A contract, naturally. And I can't start wearing fancy suits or anything. That's not in my budget. Elias smiled. We have a company clothing allowance for all executive staff, which includes personal assistants. Nia took a deep breath. I must be crazy, but okay. I'll take the job on a trial basis. We'll see how it goes. Elias extended his hand. Welcome to Monroe Enterprises, Ms. Watkins. As they shook hands, Elias felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, the plan was in motion. Candidate number 10 was now in play. But on the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about this was different, that Nia Watkins might not be as easy to figure out as the others had been. As he watched her return to work, greeting an elderly couple who had just entered the diner with a warm smile, Elias wondered if he had made a mistake, not in choosing her as candidate 10, but in thinking she would be just another test to administer, another woman to evaluate and ultimately dismiss. Because something told him that Nia Watkins might end up testing him instead. Nia couldn't believe what had just happened. As she refilled coffee cups and took orders, her mind kept returning to Elias Monroe and his unexpected job offer. It seemed too good to be true, and in Nia's experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. After her shift ended at 2 a.m., she walked to the bus stop, hugging her jacket tight against the cool night air. Her apartment was a 30-minute bus ride away, in a neighborhood that most people like Elias Monroe probably never visited. As she waited for the bus, she pulled out her phone and did a quick search for Elias Monroe. Thousands of results popped up. News articles about business deals, photos of him at charity events, snippets about his vast fortune. According to one article, he was worth over $3 billion. Nia felt a knot form in her stomach. Why would a billionaire walk into a diner and offer a job to a waitress? It didn't make sense. There had to be a catch. But what if there wasn't? What if this was one of those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities her grandmother used to talk about? God opens doors, Grandma Rose would say. Our job is to be brave enough to walk through them. The bus arrived, its doors opening with a hiss. Nia stepped on, paid her fare, and found a seat near the back. As the bus rumbled through the nearly empty streets, she thought about what this job could mean for her. No more double shifts. No more choosing between paying rent and buying textbooks. She could finally go back to school, finish her degree, maybe even move to a safer neighborhood. But still, that nagging doubt remained. Why her? By the time she reached her apartment, a small one-bedroom on the third floor of a building that had seen better days, Nia had decided to proceed with caution. She would accept the job, yes, but she would keep her eyes open. And at the first sign that something wasn't right, she would walk away. Little did she know that she was already part of a test she had never agreed to take. 2 weeks later, Nia stood in the lobby of Monroe Tower, a gleaming skyscraper in the heart of the financial district. She had given notice at both her jobs, much to the dismay of Maggie at the diner and the children at the daycare center. She had bought a new outfit for her first day, nothing fancy, just a simple black dress and blazer from a department store sale rack, but still the most expensive clothes she had ever owned. Her hands were sweating as she approached the security desk. "Nia Watkins," she said to the guard. "I'm starting today as Mr. Monroe's assistant." The guard checked his tablet, then nodded. 52nd floor, Ms. Watkins. Someone will meet you at the elevator." The elevator ride was smooth and silent, giving Nia too much time to second-guess herself. What did she know about being a personal assistant to a billionaire? What if she made a fool of herself on the first day? When the doors opened on the 52nd floor, a tall, thin man in an impeccable suit was waiting. "Ms. Watkins," he said with a polite nod. "I'm Raymond Chen, Mr. Monroe's current assistant. I'll be training you over the next few weeks before I move to my new position." Raymond led her through a series of sleek modern offices. Everyone they passed was dressed in expensive clothes, speaking in hushed, important tones. Nia felt out of place, like an imposter who would surely be discovered at any moment. Finally, they reached a large corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. "This is Mr. Monroe's office," Raymond explained. "And this," he indicated a smaller but still impressive office adjacent to it, "will be yours." Nia stared at the space, her space. It was larger than her entire apartment, with a sleek desk, a comfortable-looking chair, and its own impressive view. "Mr. Monroe won't be in until this afternoon," Raymond continued, "which gives us time to go over the basics. Shall we begin?" The next few hours were a whirlwind of information. Nia learned about Elias's schedule, his preferences, his business associates. She was given access to his calendar, his email, his contact list. Raymond explained which calls to put through immediately, which could wait, and which to politely decline. "Mr. Monroe values his privacy," Raymond emphasized. "Discretion is perhaps the most important aspect of this job." By the time Elias arrived, Nia's head was spinning with information, but she was determined to prove herself worthy of this opportunity. "Good afternoon, Mr. Monroe," she said professionally as he entered the office suite. Elias looked different here than he had at the diner, more formal, more distant. But when he saw her, a hint of the man who had sat in her booth appeared in his smile. "Ms. Watkins," he said, "welcome to Monroe Enterprises. I trust Raymond has been showing you the ropes?" "Yes, sir," Nia replied. "There's a lot to learn, but I'm a quick study." "I'm sure you are," Elias said. "Raymond, what's on the agenda for this afternoon?" As Raymond briefed Elias on his schedule, Nia watched the interaction, trying to learn. This was a world away from the diner, from the daycare, but she was determined to adapt. Later that afternoon, as Nia was organizing her new desk, Elias stopped by her office. "How's the first day going?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "It's overwhelming," Nia admitted honestly, "but in a good way. I'm excited to learn." Elias nodded, his expression unreadable. "There's a charity event this weekend. I'd like you to attend. to start meeting some of the people you'll be dealing with in this role. Of course, Nia said, though the thought of a high society charity event made her stomach clench with anxiety. I'll be there. Good, Elias said. Then, almost as an afterthought, the company has an account at Bergman's on 5th Avenue. Go there tomorrow and get whatever you need for the event. Raymond will set it up. Before Nia could protest, Elias had turned and walked back to his office, leaving her staring after him, wondering once again what she had gotten herself into. The charity event was held at the National Museum of Art, its grand halls transformed into a glittering wonderland of wealth and privilege. Nia, dressed in a simple but elegant black gown from Bergman's, the least expensive one she could find that still seemed appropriate, felt like Cinderella at the ball. Except in this version, Cinderella was acutely aware that she didn't belong. She had spent the past few days learning everything she could about Elias's business associates, memorizing names and faces so she wouldn't embarrass him. But standing here now, surrounded by people who moved through this world with effortless confidence, she felt her resolve wavering. "There you are," Elias's voice came from behind her. He looked devastatingly handsome in a tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his posture radiating authority. "Mr. Monroe," Nia greeted him, grateful for a familiar face. "Elias, please," he said. "At least at events like this, it's less formal." Nia nodded. "Elias, come," he said, offering his arm. "There are people I want you to meet." For the next hour, Elias introduced Nia to a blur of important people, business associates, society figures, politicians. She did her best to remember names, to smile and engage in small talk, to not show how overwhelmed she felt. As the evening progressed, Nia noticed something strange. When she was with Elias, people treated her with respect, assuming she must be important if she was by his side. But when he stepped away briefly to speak with someone, the same people looked through her as if she were invisible. "Don't take it personally," said a voice beside her during one such moment. Nia turned to see a striking woman in a red dress watching her with amusement. "They're like sharks. They only care about people who can benefit them." "And who are you?" Nia asked, more bluntly than she intended. The woman laughed. "Someone who knows how this game is played. I'm Vanessa Thorne." Something about the name triggered a memory. Hadn't Raymond mentioned a Vanessa during one of their training sessions? Something about her being Elias's ex? "Nia Watkins," she replied cautiously. "So you're Elias's new assistant," Vanessa said, her eyes scanning Nia from head to toe. Interesting choice. Not his usual type. Before Nia could respond, Elias returned, his expression darkening when he saw who Nia was talking to. "Vanessa," he said coldly, "I didn't realize you were on the guest list." "Oh, Elias," Vanessa purred. "You know I'm always invited to these things. Society would be so dull without a little drama, don't you think?" She turned to Nia with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It was lovely meeting you, Nia. Good luck with your new position." As Vanessa sauntered away, Nia could feel the tension radiating from Elias. "I take it you two have history," she said quietly. "Ancient history," Elias replied tersely, "and not worth discussing." But for the rest of the evening, Elias seemed distracted, his mood darker. And Nia couldn't help but wonder about the story behind that tension. It wasn't until they were leaving, waiting for Elias's car under the museum's grand entrance, that Nia found the courage to speak up. "You don't have to tell me about Vanessa," she said, "but whatever happened, it still affects you. And if I'm going to be good at this job, it helps to understand the players involved." Elias was silent for a long moment, his face half in shadow. "Vanessa was my fiancée," he finally said. "She left me at the altar, after taking what she could get from me." The bitterness in his voice was palpable, and Nia felt a surge of compassion for this man, who seemed to have everything but was clearly still wounded. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "That must have been painful." Elias looked at her, surprised by the genuine empathy in her voice. "It was educational," he said finally. "I learned a valuable lesson about people's true motives." The car arrived, and Elias opened the door for Nia. As they drove through the city, Nia couldn't help but think about what Elias had shared. It explained so much about him, the wariness in his eyes, the careful distance he maintained. When they reached her apartment building, Elias insisted on walking her to the door, despite her protests that it wasn't necessary. "Thank you for tonight," Nia said as they reached her door, "for introducing me to everyone, for giving me this opportunity." Elias nodded. "You did well. Better than I expected, actually." "What did you expect?" Nia asked, curious. "I expected you to be intimidated." to try too hard to fit in. Most people do. "Oh, I was definitely intimidated," Nia admitted with a small laugh. "But my grandmother always taught me that the only way to handle intimidating situations is to be yourself, because trying to be someone else just adds an extra layer of stress." Elias looked at her with new interest. "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She was," Nia said softly, "the wisest person I've ever known." There was a moment of silence, filled with something Nia couldn't quite name. Then Elias cleared his throat. "I should go. Raymond will brief you on next week's schedule tomorrow." "Good night, Elias," Nia said. "Good night, Nia." As she watched him walk back to his car, Nia couldn't shake the feeling that tonight had shifted something between them. That for a brief moment, Elias Monroe had let his guard down and shown her a glimpse of the man behind the billionaire facade. What she didn't know was that tonight had been part of his test, and despite his best efforts to remain objective, Elias couldn't deny that Nia Watkins had surprised him. She hadn't fawned over the wealthy people she met. She hadn't tried to leverage her connection to him. She hadn't even been impressed by the expensive gown he'd told her to buy. In fact, as his car pulled away from her modest apartment building, Elias realized with a start that for the first time since he began his tests, he was actually hoping that candidate number 10 would pass. Over the next few weeks, Nia settled into her role at Monroe Enterprises. The learning curve was steep, but she was determined and adaptable. Raymond, preparing for his own transition, seemed impressed by how quickly she grasped the complex dynamics of Elias's business and personal life. "You're a natural," he told her one afternoon as they reviewed Elias's schedule for an upcoming business trip to Tokyo. Nia smiled, but inside she still felt like an imposter. Every day brought new challenges, new reminders of how different this world was from the one she had known. One of the strangest aspects of the job was how closely she worked with Elias. She knew when he woke up, what he ate for breakfast, who he spoke to throughout the day. She screened his calls, managed his emails, sat in on meetings, prepared briefings. She knew more about Elias Monroe than she had ever known about anyone outside her family, and yet, in many ways, he remained a mystery. Sometimes he was warm and almost friendly, asking about her day or remembering details she had mentioned in passing. Other times he was distant and businesslike, treating her with the same polite detachment he showed everyone else. It was during one of these warmer moments, as they worked late in his office reviewing contracts, that Nia finally gathered the courage to ask about something that had been bothering her. "Can I ask you something personal?" Elias looked up from the contract he was reading, one eyebrow raised. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Fair enough," Nia said. "Why did you really hire me? And don't say it's because you're a good judge of character. There has to be more to it than that." Elias set down the contract, his expression guarded. "Why do you think I hired you?" "I don't know," Nia admitted. "That's why I'm asking. It just seems unlikely. A billionaire walks into a diner and offers a waitress a job that people with MBAs would kill for? It's like something out of a movie, not real life." For a moment, Elias looked like he might actually answer honestly, then his expression closed off. "Maybe I just wanted someone who wouldn't come with preconceived notions about how this job should be done. Someone I could train my way." It wasn't the whole truth. Nia could feel that in her bones, but it was clear that it was all she was going to get for now. "Okay," she said, not pushing further. "Just know that whatever your reasons were, I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I intend to earn my place here." Elias looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. "I believe you will," he said finally. The moment was interrupted by Elias's phone ringing. As Nia watched him answer it, slipping back into his role as the powerful CEO, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Elias Monroe than he let anyone see, and despite her better judgment, she found herself wanting to discover what that was. What she didn't realize was that while she was trying to figure him out, Elias was still testing her, and the biggest tests were yet to come. A month into her new job, Nia was finally starting to feel like she belonged at Monroe Enterprises. Raymond had moved to his new position as head of the charitable foundation, leaving Nia fully in charge of managing Elias's complex life. The long hours and demanding schedule were exhausting, but Nia found herself enjoying the challenge. She had just finished arranging Elias's trip to London when he appeared in her office doorway. "Everything set for London?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe in that casual way that somehow made him seem more approachable. "All confirmed," Nia replied. "Your meetings are scheduled, the hotel has your preferences on file, and the car service will pick you up at 6 a.m. tomorrow." Elias nodded, looking pleased. You've done an excellent job, Nia. Better than I expected, to be honest. You know, most bosses just say, "Thank you," Nia said with a small smile. To her surprise, Elias laughed, a genuine laugh that transformed his usually serious face. "Thank you, then, and as a token of my appreciation, I'd like you to come with me to London." Nia blinked in surprise. "To London? But I've never even been on a plane before." "All the more reason to come," Elias said. "It'll be good experience for you, and I could use your help with the meetings." Nia hesitated. The thought of traveling to London was exciting, but also intimidating. And there was something else bothering her, a nagging suspicion that there was more to this invitation than professional development. "Is this another test?" she asked quietly. Elias's expression shifted, becoming guarded. "What do you mean?" "I've noticed things," Nia said carefully. "The way you sometimes watch me when you think I'm not looking. How you'll mention something about your wealth and then seem to be waiting for my reaction. It's like you're evaluating me somehow, testing me." For a moment, something like alarm flashed across Elias's face. Then his usual mask of control slipped back into place. "I observe all my employees," he said dismissively. "It's how I assess their potential." Nia wasn't convinced, but she let it go for now. "I'll need to get a passport," she said instead. "Already taken care of," Elias replied. "Raymond had the company expedite one for you last week, just in case." Nia shook her head in amazement. "You really do think of everything, don't you?" "It's my job to be prepared," Elias said, "just as it's yours to keep me organized." Speaking of which, did the financial reports come in from the Tokyo office? And just like that, they were back to business. But as Nia pulled up the reports on her tablet, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled onto something important. There was more to this job, more to her relationship with Elias, than met the eye. And somehow she was going to figure out what it was. London was like something out of a dream. From the moment their private jet, another first for Nia, touched down at Heathrow, she felt like she had stepped into another world. A sleek black car whisked them to the Savoy, a hotel so grand and historic that Nia felt underdressed just walking through the lobby. "Your suite, Ms. Watkins," the concierge said, handing her a key card with a polite bow. "Adjacent to Mr. Munro's suite, as requested." The suite was bigger than her entire apartment, with a view of the Thames that took her breath away. Nia spent a few minutes just wandering from room to room, touching the plush furnishings, hardly able to believe this was real. A knock at the door interrupted her exploration. Nia opened it to find Elias, now dressed in casual clothes, designer jeans and a simple black sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Settled in?" he asked. "It's incredible," Nia said honestly. "Thank you for bringing me." "We have a free evening before meetings start tomorrow," Elias said. "I thought you might like to see a bit of London." Nia's heart skipped a beat. Was this a business outing or something more personal? The line between employer and whatever else they might be seemed to be blurring more each day. "I'd love that," she said finally. Over the next few hours, Elias showed her a side of London that most tourists never saw. They walked along the Thames as the sun set, casting golden light on the ancient buildings. They visited a tiny bookshop tucked away on a cobblestone street, where Elias insisted on buying her a beautiful leather-bound copy of Jane Eyre when he noticed her admiring it. "You didn't have to do that," Nia said as they left the shop. "I wanted to," Elias replied simply. "You mentioned once that it was your favorite book." Nia was touched that he had remembered such a small detail from one of their conversations. It was moments like these that confused her most about Elias Monroe. How could a man be so guarded, so controlled, and yet notice such small things about her? They ended the evening at a small exclusive restaurant where the chef came out personally to greet Elias. As they enjoyed the exquisite meal, Nia found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did around her boss. "Tell me about your grandmother," Elias said as they were waiting for dessert. "You mention her often." Nia smiled, memories warming her. "Grandma Rose was the strongest person I've ever known. After my mom left, she raised me on her own. Even though she was already in her 60s, she worked as a seamstress, made the most beautiful dresses you've ever seen." "Is that where you get your strength from?" Elias asked, watching her with genuine interest. "I suppose so," Nia said thoughtfully. "She taught me that life will knock you down, but staying down is a choice. No matter what happened, she always found a way to keep going, to find joy in small things." "And your mother?" Elias asked carefully. "You've never mentioned her." Nia's expression clouded. "She left when I was 12, just disappeared one day. No goodbye, no explanation. I came home from school and she was gone. Grandma Rose said she had her demons, but she trailed off, the old pain still sharp after all these years. I'm sorry, Elias said quietly. That must have been difficult. Nia looked up, surprised by the genuine empathy in his voice. It was, but it taught me something important, that the people who stay are the ones who matter. Grandma Rose stayed. She chose me even when it wasn't easy. Elias was silent for a moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Not everyone knows how to stay, he said finally. Some people only know how to take what they want and leave. Nia knew he was thinking of Vanessa, of his own painful past. On impulse, she reached across the table and touched his hand. And some people prove that wrong every day. The moment hung between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. Then their desserts arrived, breaking the spell. As they walked back to the hotel later, a light rain began to fall. Without a word, Elias removed his jacket and held it over Nia to keep her dry. It was such a simple, protective gesture, so at odds with his usually controlled demeanor, that Nia felt something shift in her heart. In that moment, she realized she was in danger of falling for Elias Monroe, and that was a complication she hadn't prepared for. The business meetings the next day were intense and high stakes. Nia watched in fascination as Elias transformed into an even more commanding version of himself, negotiating deals worth millions with calm authority. She took notes, provided information when asked, and observed the complex dance of international business. But she also noticed something else, the way other businessmen treated her. Some ignored her completely, speaking only to Elias. Others made assumptions about her role, sending her patronizing smiles or making comments about how decorative she was. After one particularly dismissive comment from an older executive, Nia saw Elias's jaw tighten. He waited until the man finished speaking, then said coolly, "Ms. Watkins isn't here to take notes, Mr. Harrington. She's here because her analysis of your company's financial weaknesses was instrumental in shaping our offer. Perhaps you'd like to hear her thoughts on the overvaluation of your Asian subsidiaries." The man had looked at Nia with new respect after that, and she had smoothly delivered an assessment that left him struggling for a response. Later, in the car back to the hotel, Nia turned to Elias. "Thank you for that." "For what?" "For standing up for me. You didn't have to do that." Elias frowned. Harrington was being disrespectful. "I don't tolerate that from anyone, especially not toward my team." "Still," Nia said, "most bosses wouldn't have bothered." "I'm not most bosses," Elias replied, his gaze intense. No, Nia thought, he certainly wasn't. That evening they had dinner in Elias's suite, reviewing the day's meetings and preparing for tomorrow. As they worked, Nia noticed Elias becoming increasingly distracted, checking his phone frequently. "Is everything okay?" she asked finally. Elias hesitated, then sighed. "There's a situation developing back home. The board is considering a proposal I specifically rejected last month. Can I help?" Nia offered. Elias looked at her thoughtfully. "Actually, yes. There's a file on the company server that contains my analysis of why this proposal would be disastrous. I need it for a video conference call with the board in an hour, but I can't seem to locate it." "I'll find it," Nia assured him, reaching for her tablet. For the next 30 minutes, she searched through the company's complex file system, following various trails and cross-references. Finally, she found what she was looking for, buried in a subfolder of archived presentations. "Here it is," she said triumphantly, sending the file to Elias's tablet. "It was misfiled under last year's strategic initiatives." Elias nodded, looking both relieved and something else. "Pleased? Well done. This will help shut down Jenkins' power play before it gains traction." As they continued working, Nia couldn't help but notice that Elias seemed to be watching her more closely than usual. It reminded her of her earlier suspicion that he was testing her somehow. But why? What was he looking for? The answer came later that night, in an unexpected way. Nia was in her suite, preparing for bed, when her phone rang. It was Raymond, calling from New York. "Nia, I'm sorry to bother you so late, but there's something you should know," he said, his voice tense. "What is it?" Nia asked, immediately alert. "Mr. Monroe's personal account seems to have been accessed by someone using your login credentials. A significant amount of money was transferred to an offshore account." Nia felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible. I would never—" "I know," Raymond cut her off, "which is why I'm calling you directly, instead of security. Something doesn't add up. When did this happen?" Nia asked, her mind racing. "About an hour ago while you were in Mr. Monroe's suite, according to the calendar." Nia frowned. "But that doesn't make sense. I was with Elias the whole time." He could see everything I was doing. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you certain?" Raymond asked carefully. "Positive," Nia said firmly. "Except for the few minutes he stepped into the bedroom to take a private call." Another pause. "Nia," Raymond said slowly, "I think you need to consider the possibility that Mr. Monroe is testing you. Testing me by framing me for theft." Nia couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "It wouldn't be the first time," Raymond said quietly. "Be careful, Nia. I've seen this pattern before." After they hung up, Nia sat on the edge of her bed, thoughts whirling. Could it be true? Would Elias really go to such lengths to test her honesty? And if so, what did that say about him, about his trust issues, his view of people? More importantly, what did it say about their relationship? The next morning, Nia was quiet as they prepared for the day's meetings. Elias noticed her subdued mood and raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," Nia lied. "Jet lag, I guess." Elias nodded, but she could tell he didn't quite believe her. Throughout the day, she caught him watching her with a thoughtful expression, as if trying to solve a puzzle. By evening, Nia had made a decision. She wouldn't confront Elias directly, not yet, but she would start paying more attention, looking for other signs of these tests Raymond had hinted at, and she would be more careful about what she shared, what she revealed, because if Elias Monroe was testing her, two could play at that game. Back in New York, life settled into a new routine. Nia continued to excel at her job, managing Elias's complex life with increasing skill, but now she was watching, waiting, looking for signs of manipulation or tests. She didn't have to wait long. About a week after their return from London, Elias asked Nia to accompany him to his home, an elegant mansion in the Hamptons, to prepare for a weekend gathering of important business associates. "It's important that everything is perfect," he explained, as his driver took them along the winding coastal road. "These particular guests can be difficult to impress." The mansion was everything Nia had imagined, sprawling, luxurious, with sweeping views of the ocean. A small army of staff greeted them, deferential and efficient. Nia found herself in a beautiful guest room larger than her entire apartment, unpacking the overnight bag she had brought. As she was organizing Elias's schedule for the weekend, a maid entered with a silver tray. "Mr. Monroe asked me to bring you this," she said, setting down the tray to reveal a velvet jewelry box. Curious, Nia opened it to find a stunning diamond necklace nestled inside. A small card read simply, "For dinner tonight, E." Nia stared at the necklace, its stones catching the light in dazzling rainbows. It was beautiful and expensive, very expensive. A test. It had to be. She closed the box and made her way to Elias's study, where he was on a call. When he finished, she placed the jewelry box on his desk. "Thank you for the thought," she said calmly, "but I can't accept this." Elias leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "Why not? It's just a loan for the weekend, to help you fit in with the other guests." "I don't need diamonds to do my job," Nia replied, "and I'm more comfortable being myself." Something flickered in Elias's eyes. Surprise, respect? It was gone too quickly for Nia to be sure. "As you wish," he said finally. "Though I must warn you, these particular guests place a high value on appearances. Then they'll have to judge me on who I am, not what I'm wearing," Nia said firmly. That evening, Nia dressed in the simplest outfit she had brought, a black dress she had owned since before starting at Monroe Enterprises. As she entered the grand dining room, she felt the curious stares of the other guests, women dripping in jewels, men in custom tuxedos. Elias, standing by the fireplace with a drink in hand, watched her entrance with an unreadable expression. But as she approached, he smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, offering her a glass of champagne. Throughout dinner, Nia was acutely aware of being evaluated by the other guests. Their questions seemed designed to expose her humble background, to highlight the fact that she didn't belong in their world. "And where did you attend university, Ms. Watkins?" asked a silver-haired woman with a predatory smile. "I haven't completed my degree yet," Nia replied honestly. "I'm saving up to go back and finish." "How determined of you," the woman said with a thin smile. "And what does your family think of your new position with Elias?" "My grandmother would have been proud," Nia said simply. "She believed in hard work and seizing opportunities." "Would have been," the woman pressed. "She passed away 3 years ago," Nia said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "She raised me after my mother left." "Oh, how dreadful," the woman said, not sounding sympathetic at all. "No father in the picture either, I assume." Before Nia could respond, Elias cut in smoothly. Nia has been instrumental in finalizing the Singapore deal, Vivian. In fact, it was her analysis of the market trends that helped us outmaneuver Harrison Global. The conversation shifted to business, and Nia shot Elias a grateful look. He nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Later, as the guests moved to the terrace for after-dinner drinks, Elias found Nia standing alone, looking out at the moonlit ocean. "You handled Vivian remarkably well," he said, coming to stand beside her. "She's been known to reduce grown men to tears." Nia smiled. "I've dealt with worse. At least she was direct with her disdain. I prefer that to fake smiles any day." Elias studied her profile in the moonlight. "You continue to surprise me, Nia Watkins." "Is that a good thing?" she asked, turning to face him. "It's unusual," Elias admitted. "I'm not often surprised by people." "Maybe you don't give them enough of a chance to show you who they really are," Nia suggested. Something shifted in Elias's expression, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked. "Perhaps," he said softly. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the waves break on the shore below. Then Elias spoke again, his voice different somehow, more hesitant. "Why did you really turn down the necklace, Nia?" "The truth." Nia considered her answer carefully. "Because I don't want anything from you that I haven't earned," she said finally. "And because diamonds aren't what impress me about you, Elias." "What does impress you then?" he asked, his voice low. "The way you defended me at dinner, the fact that you remember small details about things I like, how hard you work. Not because you need more money, but because you care about what you've built." Nia paused, then added quietly, "The man I see glimpses of sometimes, when you forget to be the untouchable Elias Monroe." For a moment, Elias looked almost shaken by her words. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched her cheek, the gesture so gentle it made her heart ache. "You see too much, Nia," he whispered. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by one of the guests calling Elias's name. The moment shattered, and Elias's mask slipped back into place as he turned to greet the approaching couple. But something had changed between them. A line had been crossed, a truth acknowledged, and neither of them was sure what it meant. The weeks that followed were filled with a new kind of tension. Nia continued to excel at her job, and Elias continued to test her in subtle ways, leaving large sums of cash where she would find it, having beautiful clothes delivered to her office by mistake, even arranging for an expensive car to be placed at her disposal. Each time Nia politely but firmly declined these gifts, returning them with a quiet dignity that both frustrated and fascinated Elias. What she didn't know was that Elias was keeping a detailed record of these tests, just as he had with the previous 9 women, but unlike the others, whose files were filled with failures and red flags, Nia's file contained nothing but notes of her integrity, her work ethic, her refusal to be impressed by wealth. It both pleased and terrified him, because for the first time in his carefully controlled experiment, Elias was facing the possibility that he had found someone who might actually pass his tests, and that meant facing his own fear of vulnerability, of trust, of opening himself to potential hurt again. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Nia was working late in her office when her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number with a local area code. "Hello? Is this Nia Watkins?" asked a female voice she didn't recognize. "Yes, this is Nia. This is Mercy Hospital calling. We have a patient here who gave us your name as an emergency contact. A Lydia Watkins." Nia felt the room tilt sideways. Lydia Watkins, her mother. There must be some mistake," Nia stammered. "I haven't seen Lydia Watkins in 15 years. "Nevertheless, you're listed as her emergency contact," the nurse said briskly. "She's been admitted with complications from pneumonia, and her condition is serious. She's asking for you." Nia's mind was reeling. After all these years, her mother was back in her life, or trying to be. Part of her wanted to hang up, to protect herself from the woman who had abandoned her. But another part, the part raised by Grandma Rose to show compassion even when it was difficult, couldn't ignore a hospital call. "I'll be there," she said finally, her voice hollow. "Which hospital did you say?" After getting the details, Nia sat at her desk, staring at nothing. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice Elias standing in her doorway until he spoke. "Nia, is everything okay?" She looked up, startled. I need to leave early if that's all right. Family emergency." Elias frowned, concern evident in his expression. "Of course, is there anything I can do to help?" Nia shook her head, already gathering her things. "No, thank you. I just need to get to Mercy Hospital. I'll have my driver take you, Elias said, pulling out his phone. That's not necessary. It's raining, and you'll never get a taxi at this hour, Elias cut her off. Please let me do this much. Too emotionally overwhelmed to argue, Nia nodded. Thank you. 20 minutes later, she was in the back of Elias's sleek town car, watching the rain streak down the windows as they made their way through evening traffic. Her mind was a jumble of memories and emotions. Her mother's smile, the sound of her laughter, the empty house the day she left. When they arrived at the hospital, Nia thanked the driver and hurried inside, her heart pounding. At the information desk, she gave her mother's name and was directed to the 3rd floor. The woman in the hospital bed barely resembled the mother Nia remembered. Lydia Watkins had once been vibrant and beautiful, with the same warm brown skin and curly hair as her daughter. Now she was thin, her face lined with years of hard living, her hair streaked with grey. But her eyes, those were the same. Dark and expressive, now wide with surprise and something like hope as Nia entered the room. You came, Lydia said, her voice raspy. I wasn't sure you would. Nia stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, a storm of emotions churning inside her. The hospital called me. They said you were asking for me. I've been trying to find you, Lydia said, struggling to sit up. For almost a year now, ever since I got clean. Clean, Nia repeated. Sober. I'm in recovery. 14 months now. Lydia's eyes never left Nia's face, drinking in the sight of her. You look so much like Rose. She raised you right, I can see it. At the mention of her grandmother, Nia felt a flare of anger. Yes, she did. Without any help from you. Lydia flinched, but didn't look away. I deserve that. I deserve your anger, Nia. I was a terrible mother. I chose drugs over my own child. There's no excuse for that. The simple acknowledgement, free of justifications or excuses, took some of the wind out of Nia's sails. She sank into the chair beside the bed, suddenly exhausted. Why now? She asked. After all these years, why reach out now? Part of my recovery, Lydia explained, her voice weak but determined. Making amends to those I've harmed. You're at the top of that list, baby girl. Nia hadn't heard that nickname in 15 years. It sent a jolt of painful memory through her. I don't know what you want from me, she said honestly. Nothing, Lydia replied. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to let me back into your life. I needed to tell you that I'm sorry, that leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life, and that not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you, wondered how you were doing, hoped you were happy. Nia sat in silence, absorbing her mother's words. Part of her wanted to lash out, to make Lydia feel the pain of abandonment she had carried for so long, but another part, perhaps the stronger part, recognized the courage it took to face your mistakes, to seek out the person you had hurt most in the world. The doctors say I need surgery, Lydia continued when Nia didn't speak. The pneumonia caused some complications with my heart. That's why they called you. I needed someone to know in case I don't make it. Don't talk like that, Nia said automatically, surprised by the surge of protectiveness she felt. Lydia smiled weakly. There she is, the little girl who always saw the best in everyone, even me, when I didn't deserve it. Before Nia could respond, a nurse entered to check Lydia's vitals. Nia stood, feeling overwhelmed and needing space to think. I should go, she said, but I'll come back tomorrow. Hope flickered in Lydia's tired eyes. You will? Nia nodded. I will. Outside the hospital room, Nia leaned against the wall, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She had imagined this moment so many times over the years, confronting her mother, demanding answers, maybe even forgiving her. But the reality was so much messier, so much more complicated than anything she had imagined. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the tall figure approaching until he spoke her name. Nia. She looked up, startled to see Elias standing there, concern etched on his face. Elias, what are you doing here? I was worried about you, he said simply. You seemed so upset when you left. I wanted to make sure you were okay. The simple admission that he had been worried, that he cared enough to come, broke something open inside Nia. To her horror, she felt tears welling up in her eyes. It's my mother, she said, her voice cracking. After 15 years of nothing, she's suddenly back in my life, lying in a hospital bed, asking for forgiveness. Without a word, Elias stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. It was the first time he had held her, and Nia was surprised by how natural it felt, how safe she felt in his embrace. She allowed herself a moment of weakness, resting her head against his chest and letting a few tears fall. I don't know what to do, she whispered. What does your heart tell you? Elias asked quietly, his chin resting on top of her head. Nia pulled back slightly to look up at him. That's a surprisingly sentimental question from a hard-headed businessman. A ghost of a smile touched Elias's lips. Even hard-headed businessmen have hearts, Nia. Some of us just keep them better protected than others. Nia wiped away her tears, embarrassed by her emotional display. I'm sorry, this isn't your problem. You're not a problem, Nia, Elias said firmly. You're important to me. The simple admission hung in the air between them, charged with meaning neither was quite ready to face. Thank you for coming, Nia said finally. It means a lot. Elias nodded, then asked, What can I do to help? Do you need time off? Financial assistance for her medical bills? The offer was so matter-of-fact, so devoid of the usual strings attached to his tests, that Nia felt a rush of gratitude. Time off would help, she admitted. Just a few days to figure things out. Consider it done, Elias said. And the offer of help with the medical bills stands, no strings attached. Nia looked at him searchingly, trying to detect any hidden agenda. But for once, Elias Monroe seemed completely transparent, genuinely concerned, genuinely wanting to help. Thank you, she said simply. My driver is still outside, Elias said. He can take you home when you're ready, or back to the office to get your things, whatever you need. I think I'll stay a bit longer, Nia decided, but I appreciate it. Elias nodded, then hesitated before adding, Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself as much as the other person, Nia. It doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It just means refusing to carry the weight of anger anymore. With that, he squeezed her hand gently and turned to leave. Nia watched him go, wondering how this complicated man, with his walls and his tests and his carefully guarded heart, could understand so perfectly what she needed to hear. The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, consultations with doctors, and emotional conversations with her mother. Lydia's surgery was scheduled, and though the doctors were optimistic, there were risks. Nia found herself falling back into a role she had never expected to play again, daughter to Lydia Watkins. True to his word, Elias had arranged for Nia to take time off, ensuring her work was covered and that she received her full salary. He even sent flowers to Lydia's hospital room with a simple card wishing her a swift recovery. But what surprised Nia most was his absence. After that night at the hospital, Elias had kept his distance, respecting her need for space to deal with this unexpected family reunion. No tests, no gifts, no manipulation, just quiet support from afar. It was a side of Elias she hadn't seen before, and it confused her. The man who tested and manipulated, who kept everyone at arm's length, was showing a capacity for empathy and respect that didn't fit with her growing suspicions about his character. On the evening before Lydia's surgery, Nia was sitting by her mother's hospital bed, listening as Lydia shared stories of her recovery journey, the rock bottom that had finally pushed her to get help, the struggle to stay sober, the slow process of rebuilding her life. The hardest part was living with the knowledge of what I'd done to you, Lydia admitted, her eyes filled with regret. Knowing I'd missed your childhood, your graduation, all those important moments. There's no way to get those back. No, Nia agreed softly. There isn't. But maybe we could have something new, Lydia suggested hesitantly. Not the same as what we should have had, but something, if you wanted that. Nia looked at her mother, this fragile, flawed woman who had caused her so much pain but who was now fighting so hard to make amends. She thought of what Elias had said about forgiveness being a gift you give yourself. I think I'd like to try, Nia said finally. I can't promise anything. There's a lot of hurt to work through, but I'm willing to try. Tears filled Lydia's eyes. That's more than I deserve, she whispered. Thank you, baby girl. Later, as Nia was leaving the hospital, her phone rang. It was Elias. I hope I'm not intruding, he said when she answered. I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. I'm okay, Nia replied, surprised by how good it felt to hear his voice. Better than I expected, actually. My mother's surgery is tomorrow. I know, Elias said. The hospital administrator is keeping me updated. I hope that's all right. Normally, Nia might have been annoyed by such high-handed behavior, but right now, the knowledge that someone was looking out for her was comforting. It's fine, she assured him. Thank you for arranging everything, for giving me this time. Of course, Elias said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for a CEO to drop everything to help his assistant deal with family drama. Nia, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about not giving people a chance to show who they really are. Nia stopped walking, caught off guard by the sudden change in topic. What about it? You were right, Elias admitted, his voice soft. I don't. I've spent so long protecting myself from being hurt again that I've stopped seeing people clearly, stopped giving them the benefit of the doubt. That's a big realization, Nia said carefully. Yes, Elias agreed, and I owe it to you. You've made me see things differently, Nia. Question assumptions I've held for a long time. There was something in his voice, a vulnerability, an openness that Nia had never heard before. It made her heart beat faster, made her wonder if perhaps there was more to this conversation than simple concern for an employee. When you're ready to come back to work, Elias continued, I'd like us to talk, really talk. There are things I need to tell you to explain. About the tests? Nia asked quietly. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Yes, Elias finally admitted. About the tests. And other things. Okay, Nia agreed. When I'm ready, we'll talk. After they hung up, Nia stood for a moment in the hospital parking lot, thinking about Elias Monroe and the enigma he presented. The man who tested women like they were products to be evaluated. The man who had come to a hospital in the middle of the night because he was worried about her. The man who was now apparently ready to be honest with her. She wasn't sure what to make of it all. But as she headed toward the car Elias had insisted on providing for her use, Nia realized that despite everything, she was looking forward to that conversation, to finally understanding the true nature of their relationship. Because somewhere along the way, despite all her caution and all his tests, Nia Watkins had fallen in love with Elias Monroe, and she was beginning to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he might be falling for her too. What she didn't know was that Elias had already reached that conclusion, that for the first time in his carefully orchestrated experiment, he had found someone who made him question the entire premise, someone who made him want to be worthy of her rather than the other way around, someone who had unknowingly passed every test he had devised, and in doing so, had begun to heal the wounds he had carried for so long. The question now was whether he could find the courage to tell her the truth, and whether, when he did, she would be able to forgive him for the deception that had brought them together in the first place. The morning of Lydia's surgery dawned grey and rainy. Nia arrived at the hospital early, her stomach in knots as she made her way to her mother's room. Despite their complicated history, she couldn't help but worry. Lydia might have abandoned her 15 years ago, but she was still her mother. Lydia was already prepped for surgery, looking small and vulnerable in the hospital bed. When she saw Nia, her face lit up with a smile that erased years from her appearance. You came, she said, reaching out a hand. Nia took it, squeezing gently. I said I would. The doctors say it's a routine procedure, Lydia said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her nervousness. Low risk. You'll be fine, Nia assured her, with more confidence than she felt. And I'll be right here when you wake up. A nurse entered to check Lydia's vitals one last time before surgery. Family only from this point on, she said, glancing at Nia. She is family, Lydia said firmly. She's my daughter. The simple declaration, spoken with such pride, touched something deep inside Nia. For all her mother's flaws, all her mistakes, the connection between them remained. I'll see you after, Nia promised, as they prepared to wheel Lydia to the operating room. Nia, Lydia called as they were about to take her away. Whatever happens, thank you for giving me a second chance. It's more than I deserve. Nia watched as they wheeled her mother away, a strange mix of emotions churning inside her. Forgiveness, she was learning, wasn't a single moment of absolution. It was a process, a daily choice to let go of anger and make room for something new. In the waiting room, Nia tried to distract herself with magazines, but the words blurred before her eyes. Time seemed to crawl by, each minute stretching endlessly as she waited for news. Just as she was about to ask the nurse at the desk for an update, her phone rang. It was Elias. How's your mother? He asked, without preamble. Still in surgery, Nia replied, surprised by how good it felt to hear his voice. No updates yet. Do you want company? The offer caught her off guard. Don't you have meetings today? Nothing that can't be rescheduled, Elias said simply. 20 minutes later he was there, walking into the hospital waiting room with 2 cups of coffee from her favorite cafe across town. He was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater rather than his usual tailored suit, making him look younger, more approachable. I didn't know if you'd eaten, he said, handing her a coffee and a paper bag containing a muffin. Thank you, Nia said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. You didn't have to come. I wanted to, Elias replied, taking a seat beside her. No one should have to wait alone. They sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping their coffee. Then Elias spoke again, his voice soft. "My mother died when I was 14, he said unexpectedly. "Cancer. I spent a lot of time in hospital waiting rooms hoping for good news that never came." Nia looked at him in surprise. In all the months she had worked for him, Elias had never mentioned his mother, never shared anything so personal. "I'm sorry," she said. "That must have been very hard." Elias nodded, his eyes distant with memory. "It was. My father, he didn't handle it well, threw himself into work, left me and my brother to basically raise ourselves. That's when Alexander started to change, became obsessed with money, with power. I think he thought if he was successful enough, it would somehow make up for everything we'd lost." "And you?" Nia asked gently. "What did you do?" Elias smiled sadly. "I built walls, decided that if I never let anyone get too close, I'd never have to feel that kind of pain again." The admission hung in the air between them, a moment of rare vulnerability from a man who prided himself on control. "How's that working out for you?" Nia asked, her voice soft but direct. Elias looked at her, really looked at her, his eyes revealing more than his words ever had. "Not as well as I thought." Before Nia could respond, a doctor in surgical scrubs entered the waiting room. "Family of Lydia Watkins?" Nia stood up quickly. "That's me. How is she?" "The surgery went well," the doctor said with a reassuring smile. "We were able to repair the damage to her heart valve. She's in recovery now and should be waking up soon. You can see her in about 20 minutes. Relief washed over Nia, her knees suddenly weak. Elias stood beside her, a steadying hand on her arm. "Thank you, doctor," he said. "That's wonderful news." After the doctor left, Nia turned to Elias, tears of relief shining in her eyes. On impulse, she hugged him, the tension of the long wait dissolving in a moment of pure gratitude. Elias returned the embrace, his arms tightening around her, as if he never wanted to let her go. When they finally pulled apart, something had shifted between them. A boundary crossed, a new understanding reached. "Thank you for being here," Nia said softly. "Always," Elias replied, the simple word carrying a weight of promise. 3 days later, Lydia was recovering well enough to be discharged from the hospital. The question of where she would go loomed large. Her small rented room was up 4 flights of stairs, impossible in her current condition. "She can stay with me," Nia offered, though the prospect of sharing her tiny apartment with the mother who had abandoned her was daunting. "It'll be tight, but we'll make it work." To her surprise, Elias shook his head. "I have a better solution. I own a small apartment building in Chelsea. One of the units is empty. It's on the ground floor, fully furnished, perfect for recovery. Lydia can stay there as long as she needs." "Elias, that's too generous," Nia protested. "We couldn't possibly—" "It's sitting empty anyway," Elias interrupted. "And it's close to your place so you can visit easily. Please, Nia, let me do this." The sincerity in his eyes made it hard to refuse. And truthfully, the thought of sharing her small space with Lydia, of navigating their fragile new relationship in such close quarters, had been causing Nia anxiety. "Okay," she agreed finally, "but only temporarily. And we'll pay rent. A fair amount, not some token sum." Elias looked like he wanted to argue, but nodded instead. "Agreed, though you should know a fair rent in that neighborhood is still substantial." "We'll manage," Nia said firmly. Later that day, as they helped Lydia settle into the apartment, a beautiful space with large windows, hardwood floors, and an elevator, Nia watched as her mother and Elias talked. There was an ease between them that surprised her. Lydia charming Elias with stories of her days as a young woman singing in jazz clubs, Elias listening with genuine interest. "Your boss is quite something," Lydia remarked after Elias left to take a call. "The way he looks at you, that's not how a boss looks at an employee." Nia felt her cheeks warm. "It's complicated." "Life usually is," Lydia agreed, "but some complications are worth it." She patted the space beside her on the sofa. "Come sit with me, tell me about him." Hesitantly, Nia sat down and found herself sharing the story of how she and Elias met, how he had offered her the job, the strange tests she suspected he had been conducting. "Sounds like a man with trust issues," Lydia observed. "Not surprising given what you told me about his ex." "But why test me?" Nia asked, the question that had been bothering her for weeks. "What's he looking for?" Lydia smiled knowingly. "Isn't it obvious, baby girl? He's looking for someone he can trust, someone who wants him, not his money, someone like you." Nia shook her head. We're not." "Nia," Lydia interrupted gently. "I may have been absent for 15 years, but I'm still your mother. I can see how you feel about him and how he feels about you." Before Nia could respond, Elias returned from his call. "Everything okay?" he asked, looking between them. "Perfect," Lydia said with a smile. "We were just having a mother-daughter chat, long overdue." As they prepared to leave, Lydia pulled Elias aside while Nia was checking the kitchen supplies. Nia couldn't hear what was said, but when they rejoined her, Elias looked thoughtful, almost vulnerable. "I've made arrangements for a home health aide to visit daily," he told Lydia, "and my driver is at your disposal if you need to go to follow-up appointments." "You're too kind," Lydia said, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for taking care of my girl all these years when I couldn't." "She takes care of herself," Elias replied. "Always has, from what I understand." "Yes," Lydia agreed, a hint of sadness in her smile. She had to learn that too young. On the drive back to Nia's apartment, Elias was quiet, lost in thought. When they arrived, he walked her to her door, hesitating before speaking. "Nia, there's something I need to tell you, something important." The seriousness in his tone made her heart skip a beat. "What is it?" Elias glanced around the hallway of her apartment building. "Not here. Can we go somewhere to talk? Tomorrow, perhaps. Dinner at my place?" Nia had never been to Elias's penthouse apartment. The invitation felt significant, a crossing of yet another boundary between employer and whatever they were becoming. "Okay," she agreed. "Tomorrow." The following evening, Elias's driver picked Nia up promptly at 7. As the car glided through the city streets, Nia tried to calm her nerves. Something told her that tonight would change everything between her and Elias. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of one of the city's most exclusive buildings. When the elevator doors opened directly into the foyer, Nia was struck not by the luxury, though that was evident everywhere, but by how impersonal it felt, like a showroom rather than a home. Elias greeted her himself, looking uncharacteristically nervous. He had shed his usual business attire for casual pants and a simple button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. "Welcome," he said, taking her coat. "I hope you're hungry. I had dinner brought in from La Mer." He led her through the apartment to a terrace overlooking the city, where a table had been set for 2, candles flickering in the evening breeze. The view was breathtaking. The city stretched out below them, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. "This is beautiful," Nia said, genuinely impressed. "It's the main reason I bought this place," Elias admitted. "I come out here to think sometimes, when the walls start closing in." They sat down to dinner, making small talk about Lydia's recovery, about work, about anything but the real reason for this meeting. Nia could sense Elias's tension, the way he seemed to be working himself up to something. Finally, as they were finishing their meal, Elias set down his wine glass and took a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you, Nia. Something I'm not proud of." Nia felt her heart rate quicken. "I'm listening." "You were right about the tests," Elias began, his voice low. "I have been testing you from the very beginning, but it's worse than you think." He stood up and walked to the edge of the terrace, looking out at the city as if gathering strength. "After Vanessa left me, I was broken, not just heartbroken, but fundamentally unable to trust anyone. I convinced myself that every woman who showed interest in me was only after my money, my status, and I decided I would never be fooled again." He turned back to face her, his expression haunted. "So I created a system, a series of tests designed to expose a woman's true motives. I would approach someone under some pretext, a job offer, a charitable opportunity, sometimes just asking her out. Then, over time, I would subject her to various situations to see how she responded." Nia felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of situations?" "Leaving cash where she would find it, pretending to have financial problems to see if her interest waned, offering expensive gifts to see if she became greedy, creating opportunities for her to access my personal information." With each word, Nia felt herself growing colder. "And how many women have you subjected to these tests?" Elias met her gaze directly. 9. Before you. The implications hit Nia like a physical blow. "I'm number 10, she whispered. "The 10th test." Elias nodded, his face pale. "Yes, the job offer. That was never real, was it? It was just a way to get me into your life, to test me." "Initially, yes," Elias admitted. "But Nia, you have to understand." "Understand what?" Nia cut him off, rising from her chair. "That our entire relationship has been built on a lie? That I was never anything more than an experiment to you?" "No," Elias said urgently, stepping toward her. "That's not true. Yes, it started that way, but it became something else. You became someone important to me, someone I— Don't, Nia interrupted, holding up a hand. Don't you dare say you care about me after admitting you've been manipulating me from the start. She moved past him, heading back into the apartment, needing to get away, to think. Elias followed, his face desperate. Nia, please, let me explain. Explain what? She demanded, turning to face him. How you justified treating people like lab rats. How you convinced yourself that deception and manipulation were acceptable ways to protect yourself from getting hurt. I was wrong, Elias said, his voice breaking. I see that now. But Nia, you changed everything. You passed every test without even trying. You showed me that my whole approach was flawed, that I was looking at the world all wrong. Congratulations to me, Nia said bitterly. I passed the great Elias Munro's tests. What's my price? A lifetime of wondering what else you've lied about? She grabbed her purse, heading for the elevator. Elias moved to block her path, his eyes pleading. Nia, I'm telling you this because I don't want any more secrets between us. Because what I feel for you is real, the most real thing I've felt in years. Please give me a chance to make this right. For a moment, looking into his eyes, Nia almost weakened. But then the full weight of his deception came crashing down on her again. You want to know the irony, Elias? I was starting to fall in love with you. The real you. The man I glimpsed beneath all those walls. But now I don't even know if that man exists, or if he was just another test. The admission that she had been falling in love with him seemed to hit Elias harder than any of her accusations. He stepped back as if struck, allowing her to pass. The man you saw is real, he said quietly as she stepped into the elevator. More real than anything else in my life, and he's falling in love with you too. The elevator doors closed on his words, leaving Nia alone with her swirling emotions. By the time she reached the lobby, tears were streaming down her face. The driver was waiting, but Nia shook her head, needing to walk to clear her head. The night air was cool against her tear-stained cheeks as she wandered aimlessly, replaying Elias's confession in her mind. All this time, she had been nothing more than a test subject, candidate number 10 in his twisted experiment. And yet, she couldn't deny the genuine care he had shown during her mother's crisis, the vulnerability he had revealed in the hospital waiting room, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't noticing. Had that all been part of the test too? Or had something real grown out of his manipulative scheme? Nia didn't know what to believe anymore, and she wasn't sure she could ever trust Elias Munro again, no matter what her heart might want. For 3 days, Nia ignored Elias's calls and messages. She told Raymond she was taking personal time to care for her mother, which wasn't entirely untrue. She spent hours at Lydia's apartment, helping her recover, talking about the past, slowly rebuilding the relationship that had been shattered 15 years ago. Lydia, to her credit, didn't push when Nia arrived one morning with red-rimmed eyes and a haunted expression. She simply made tea and waited until Nia was ready to talk. When Nia finally shared what had happened, Lydia listened without judgment, her face thoughtful. What he did was wrong, she said when Nia finished. No question about that. Manipulative and dishonest. Exactly, Nia agreed, a fresh wave of anger washing over her. But, Lydia continued, I can understand why he did it. Nia looked at her in disbelief. You're defending him. No, baby girl. I'm just saying I understand. When you've been deeply hurt, you'll do almost anything to avoid feeling that pain again. Lydia's eyes were sad with the weight of her own mistakes. I should know. I ran away from my pain, and from you, for 15 years. The comparison startled Nia. That's different. Is it? Lydia asked gently. We both made terrible choices because we were afraid. The difference is Elias recognized his mistake and is trying to make it right. It took me much longer to find that courage. Nia was silent, absorbing her mother's words. There was truth in them, though she wasn't ready to admit it. The question isn't whether what he did was wrong, Lydia continued. It was. The question is whether what you two have now, the real connection that's grown between you, is strong enough to overcome that wrong. I don't know, Nia admitted, her voice small. I'm so angry with him, but I also miss him, which makes me even angrier. Lydia smiled knowingly. That's how you know it's real, baby girl. The people who can hurt us most are the ones we care about deepest. Later that evening, as Nia was leaving, Lydia handed her a small, worn book. Your grandmother gave me this when I was struggling, she said. It helped me find my way back. Maybe it'll help you too. The book was a collection of poems about forgiveness and second chances. Nia clutched it tightly, tears threatening again. Thank you, she whispered. You know, Lydia said thoughtfully, when I first decided to find you, to ask for your forgiveness, I never imagined you would actually give it. I thought I'd tell you I was sorry, and you'd tell me to go to hell, and that would be that. I'd have done my part, eased my conscience. What changed? Nia asked. Lydia smiled. You did. You looked at me in that hospital room, with every right to hate me, and you chose compassion instead. You gave me a chance I didn't deserve. That's a rare gift, Nia. Not everyone has the strength to offer it. The words stayed with Nia as she walked home, the poetry book tucked safely in her purse. Was she strong enough to forgive Elias? Did he deserve that chance any more than Lydia had? She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the tall figure sitting on the steps of her apartment building. Elias rose as she approached, his face haggard, as if he hadn't slept in days. Nia, he said, his voice rough, please just give me 5 minutes. Part of her wanted to walk past him, to hold on to her anger like a shield. But another part, perhaps the part that had forgiven her mother, made her stop. 5 minutes, she agreed. They sat on the steps, the evening air cool around them. For a moment, Elias seemed at a loss for words, as if now that he had her attention, he didn't know what to say. I've never been good at this, he finally admitted. Apologizing, being vulnerable. It goes against everything I've trained myself to be. And what is that? Nia asked. In control, self-sufficient, invulnerable. Elias ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. After Vanessa, I convinced myself that was the only way to survive. To never need anyone, to never trust anyone completely. So you created the tests, Nia said. Elias nodded. I thought I was being smart, protecting myself, but all I was really doing was making sure I never had to risk anything, never had to be truly vulnerable. It was cowardice, not wisdom. The admission, so honest, so raw, cracked something in Nia's resolve. The other women, she said, what happened to them when they failed your tests? I ended things, Elias said simply. Politely, but definitively. The job offers were rescinded, the dates stopped, the charitable partnerships dissolved. I moved on to the next candidate. And if I had failed? Nia asked, needing to know. Would you have fired me? Just like that? Elias looked at her, his eyes pained. Probably. At the beginning. But Nia, something changed. You changed me. The more I got to know you, the less the tests mattered. I found myself hoping you would pass, not because I needed you to fit some ideal, but because I couldn't bear the thought of you not being in my life. When did you know? Nia asked. That it had become real for you? Elias thought for a moment. That night at the hospital when you got the call about your mother. Seeing you so vulnerable, so scared. All I wanted was to protect you, to take away your pain. Not because it was a test or because I was evaluating you, but because I couldn't stand to see you hurting. He reached for her hand, and to her surprise, Nia didn't pull away. I'm so sorry, Nia. Not just for the deception, but for not trusting in what we were building, for not believing that something real could grow even from such flawed beginnings. Nia looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers. I don't know if I can trust you again, she said honestly. You hurt me, Elias. I know, he acknowledged, and I'll spend every day trying to make that right if you'll let me. Not with money or gifts or grand gestures, but with honesty, with vulnerability, with the kind of trust you've shown me from the beginning. Nia was silent, weighing his words, weighing her own heart. She thought of her mother, of second chances, of the courage it took to forgive. I'm not saying yes, she said finally, but I'm not saying no either. I need time, Elias. Time to think, to process everything. Can you give me that? Relief washed over his face. I can give you anything you need, Nia. Time, space, answers, whatever it takes. As he stood to leave, Nia had one more question. The job, is it still mine, regardless of what happens between us personally? Of course, Elias said without hesitation. You're excellent at what you do. That was never part of the test. Nia nodded, a small comfort in the midst of so much uncertainty. Good night, Elias. Good night, Nia, he replied softly. Thank you for listening. As she watched him walk away, Nia felt the weight of the poetry book in her purse, her mother's words echoing in her mind. Forgiveness was a choice, a gift you gave yourself as much as the other person. But it wasn't an easy choice, especially when the hurt ran deep. Only time would tell if what she and Elias had built was strong enough to withstand the truth of how it began. A week passed, and Nia gradually returned to her normal routine. She went back to work where Raymond tactfully rearranged schedules to minimize her direct contact with Elias. She continued visiting Lydia daily, their relationship growing stronger, as they navigated the complex emotions of their reunion. And she thought about Elias, his confession, his apology, the pain in his eyes when she walked away. She thought about the man she had glimpsed beneath the facade of the powerful CEO, the man who had sat with her in a hospital waiting room and shared the story of his mother's death. Was that man real, or just another manipulation? On Friday afternoon, Nia was at her desk when her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but something made her answer. "Nia Watkins," she said professionally. "Ms. Watkins, this is Margaret Chen, Raymond's wife," said a female voice. "I hope you don't mind me calling you directly, but Raymond suggested you might be able to help." "Of course," Nia replied, surprised. "What can I do for you?" "It's about Elias," Margaret said, concern evident in her voice. "Raymond is worried about him. He's not sleeping, barely eating. He cancelled 3 important meetings this week, which is completely unlike him. Raymond thinks Elias is giving up." "Giving up?" Nia repeated, a flicker of alarm rising in her chest. "On what?" "On everything," Margaret said. "The company, his plans, himself. Raymond has never seen him like this, not even after what happened with Vanessa. He said the only person who might be able to reach him is you." Nia felt a conflicting surge of emotions. Concern for Elias battling with her lingering anger and hurt. "I don't know what you expect me to do," she said carefully. "Elias and things are complicated right now." "I understand," Margaret said gently. "And I wouldn't ask if Raymond wasn't truly concerned. Elias is at his house in the Hamptons. He went there yesterday and hasn't responded to any calls or messages since. Raymond is afraid he might do something drastic." The implication sent a chill through Nia. "You think he would harm himself?" "I don't know," Margaret admitted. "But Raymond has never been this worried before. Please, Miss Watkins, just check on him. Make sure he's okay." After hanging up, Nia sat at her desk, her mind racing. Despite everything, the thought of Elias in pain, possibly in danger, was unbearable. Whatever he had done, whatever lies he had told, she couldn't simply ignore this plea for help. Decision made, Nia grabbed her purse and headed for the elevator. She would go to the Hamptons, check on Elias, make sure he was safe. After that, well, she would figure it out when the time came. The drive to the Hamptons took longer than expected. Friday afternoon traffic clogging the highways out of the city. By the time Nia reached Elias's beachfront mansion, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured grounds. The house was dark, no lights visible from the driveway. Nia approached the front door with trepidation, ringing the bell and waiting. No answer. She tried again, then knocked loudly. Still nothing. Worry gnawing at her, Nia tried the door handle. To her surprise, it turned easily in her hand. "Elias?" she called, stepping into the darkened foyer. "It's Nia. Are you here?" Silence greeted her. Nia moved further into the house, turning on lights as she went. Everything was immaculate, untouched. No signs of disturbance or distress. But no signs of Elias either. A glimmer of light caught her attention, a faint glow coming from the back of the house toward the beach. Following it, Nia made her way through the kitchen and out onto a wide deck overlooking the ocean. There, sitting alone in a lounge chair, a glass of whiskey in hand, was Elias. He looked up as she approached, surprise and something else, hope, flickering across his face. "Nia," he said, his voice rough. "What are you doing here?" "Raymond's wife called me," Nia explained, relief washing over her at finding him safe. "They were worried about you. You haven't been answering your phone." Elias gestured vaguely toward the house, left it inside, needed to think without distractions. Now that the immediate fear for his safety had passed, Nia took a moment to really look at him. He was unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled. He looked like a man who had given up. "Raymond thinks you're falling apart," she said bluntly, taking a seat in the chair beside his. Elias gave a hollow laugh. "Raymond thinks too much." "Are you?" Nia pressed. "Falling apart?" Elias was silent for a long moment, staring out at the darkening ocean. "Maybe," he admitted finally. "Everything I built my life around seems meaningless now. The company, the money, the power. What's the point of it all if I'm still alone at the end of the day?" The raw honesty in his voice touched something in Nia, cutting through her lingering anger. "You're not alone, Elias," she said softly. "You have Raymond, your brother, friends, employees, business associates, people who want something from me." Elias corrected bitterly. "Not the same thing." "What about me?" Nia asked before she could stop herself. Elias looked at her then, really looked at her, his eyes filled with a pain that took her breath away. "You're the one person who saw me, really saw me, and I drove you away with my fear and my stupid tests." He set down his whiskey glass, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "You asked me once if I even knew what love is. The truth is I didn't. Not until I felt what it was like to lose you." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable in a way Elias Monroe had never allowed himself to be before. "I came here to think," he continued, his voice low, "to figure out what my life is supposed to be now, without the tests, without the walls, without you." "And what did you decide?" Nia asked, her heart beating faster. "That I need to change, fundamentally change, not just my actions, but the way I think, the way I see the world. That I need to learn to trust, to be vulnerable, to risk getting hurt. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it?" He turned to face her fully, his expression more open than she had ever seen it. "I love you, Nia. I think I have since that first night in the diner, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness or your love, but I needed you to know that you changed me. That meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me, even if I ruined it with my fear." Nia sat silently, absorbing his words, feeling their truth resonate within her. This was not the calculated charm of a man running a test. This was raw, messy, real emotion, the kind that couldn't be faked. "What would you do differently?" she asked finally. "If you could go back, change how things happened between us?" Elias thought for a moment. "I would have been honest from the start, told you about my fears, my trust issues, given you the choice to know the real me, flaws and all, and I would have trusted that if what we felt was real, it would be enough." "It might have been," Nia acknowledged softly. Hope flickered in Elias's eyes. "And now? Is it too late for us?" Nia looked out at the ocean, at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. She thought about her mother, about second chances, about the courage it took to forgive. She thought about the man before her, not the billionaire, not the manipulator, but the broken, honest man who was finally letting her see his truth. "I don't know," she said truthfully. "What I feel for you is still there, Elias. The hurt hasn't erased it, but trust once broken is hard to rebuild." "I understand," Elias said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes, "and I'll accept whatever you decide. But Nia, if there's any chance at all that you could forgive me someday, I'll wait, however long it takes." The simple declaration, free of manipulation or pressure, touched Nia deeply. This was the real Elias Monroe, vulnerable, honest, willing to risk rejection rather than hide behind his walls. "I'm not ready to give you an answer tonight," Nia said gently. "I need more time, but I'm not walking away either." Relief washed over Elias's face. "That's more than I deserve," he said softly. They sat together in companionable silence as darkness fell completely, the sound of waves breaking on the shore a soothing backdrop. Neither spoke, but something had shifted between them, a tentative bridge forming across the chasm of hurt and mistrust. Finally, Nia stood. "I should go. It's getting late." Elias rose as well. "Stay," he said quickly, then added, "Not with me. The house has 6 bedrooms. You could have your own space." "It's too dark to drive back to the city now." Nia hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but I'll leave first thing in the morning." "Of course," Elias agreed. As he showed her to one of the guest rooms, Elias maintained a respectful distance, careful not to pressure or push. When they reached the door, he paused. "Thank you for coming to check on me," he said simply. "It means more than you know." "Get some sleep, Elias," Nia replied gently. "Things look clearer in the morning." After he left, Nia sat on the edge of the luxurious bed, her emotions a tangled mess. She had come here angry, hurt, determined to maintain her distance. But seeing Elias so broken, so honest in his pain, had shifted something inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. The recognition that they were both flawed, both afraid in their own ways, both deserving of a second chance. As she drifted off to sleep, Nia thought about something her grandmother used to say. The heart knows its own truth, even when the mind is still figuring things out. Tonight, her heart was telling her that despite everything, what she felt for Elias was real. That beneath the tests and the lies, there was something worth fighting for. Whether she was brave enough to listen to that truth remained to be seen. Morning came with soft light filtering through the curtains and the distant sound of waves. For a moment, Nia was disoriented, then remembered where she was, in Elias's Hamptons house, having come to check on him after Margaret's worried call. After showering and dressing in the same clothes from yesterday, Nia made her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee. She found Elias in the kitchen, looking marginally better than he had the night before. He had shaved and changed clothes, though the dark circles under his eyes remained. "Good morning," he said, offering her a mug of coffee. "Did you sleep okay?" "Better than expected," Nia admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "You? First decent sleep in days," Elias replied. "Having you here, it helped." Nia sipped her coffee, not sure how to respond to that. "I should get back to the city," she said finally. "Lydia will be expecting me." "Of course," Elias said quickly. "But there's something I'd like to show you first if you have a few minutes." Curiosity won out over Nia's desire to maintain distance. "What is it?" "In my study," Elias said, gesturing for her to follow him. The study was a warm, wood-paneled room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a large desk facing the ocean view. On the desk was a stack of manila folders, each labeled with a woman's name. "These are the files," Elias explained, his voice tense, "on all the women I tested, including you." Nia stared at the folders, a sick feeling in her stomach. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to know everything," Elias said simply. "No more secrets, no more hidden agendas. These files represent the worst of me, my fear, my mistrust, my manipulation, and I want you to watch me destroy them." He picked up a small metal trash can and began feeding the folders into it one by one. When he reached the one with Nia's name, he hesitated, then handed it to her. "This one is yours to destroy, or to read first if you want. I won't hide anything from you anymore." Nia looked down at the folder in her hands, her name written in Elias's neat handwriting. Part of her was curious. What had he written about her? What tests had she passed without even knowing? But another part, the part that was trying to move forward, didn't want to look back, didn't want to see herself through the lens of Elias's experiment. Without opening it, Nia dropped the folder into the trash can. "The past is the past," she said quietly. "What matters is what we do now." Relief and gratitude washed over Elias's face. He took a lighter from his desk drawer and, after a moment's hesitation, set fire to the papers in the trash can. Together they watched as the files burned, the physical evidence of Elias's deception turning to ash. "A symbolic gesture," Nia noted. "But a meaningful one," Elias replied. "A promise that I'm leaving that part of myself behind." When the flames died down, leaving nothing but ashes, Elias turned to Nia. "I know you need time," he said, "and I'll give you as much as you need. But I want you to know that I meant what I said last night. I love you, Nia, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your trust again, if you'll let me." The sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability in his voice, touched something deep inside Nia. This was not the controlled, manipulative Elias who had tested her. This was a man laying his heart bare, risking everything on the chance that she might someday forgive him. "I can't make any promises right now," Nia said honestly. "I need to think, to sort through everything, but Elias, I haven't given up on us either." The simple admission brought a light to Elias's eyes that had been missing for weeks. "That's all I can ask for," he said softly. As Nia prepared to leave, Elias walked her to her car. Before she got in, he touched her arm gently. "I've been thinking about what you asked me that night at dinner, about what love is." Nia remembered the question, thrown out in anger and hurt. "And? I think love is choosing someone day after day, even when it's hard. It's seeing them, really seeing them, flaws and all, and still wanting to be by their side. It's being brave enough to be vulnerable, to risk getting hurt because the alternative is never truly connecting with anyone." He took a deep breath. "That's what I feel for you, Nia. Not infatuation, not possession, not the shallow attraction I mistook for love with Vanessa. Real love, the kind that changes you, makes you want to be better." Nia felt tears prick at her eyes, moved by the raw honesty in his words. On impulse, she reached up and touched his cheek gently. "That's a good answer," she said softly. Before he could respond, she got into her car and started the engine. As she drove away, Nia glanced in her rearview mirror to see Elias standing in the driveway, watching her go. The image stayed with her all the way back to the city. This powerful man, brought to his knees by love and the fear of losing it. For the first time since learning the truth about his tests, Nia felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps out of such flawed beginnings, something true and lasting could still be built. Perhaps forgiveness was not just a gift she could give Elias, but one she could give herself as well. Permission to love, despite the risk, to trust, despite the hurt. Only time would tell. But as she drove through the morning sunshine, Nia found herself smiling for the first time in days. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. Both she and Elias had been changed by their encounter. And maybe, just maybe, that change was for the better. What she didn't yet realize was that the hardest test still lay ahead of them, one that would challenge not just their growing feelings for each other, but everything Elias had built his life upon. A test that would prove once and for all whether the love between them was strong enough to withstand the storms yet to come. 2 weeks had passed since that morning at Elias's beach house when they had burned the files together. 2 weeks of careful distance, of thinking, of trying to sort through the tangle of emotions that Nia felt. Whenever she thought about Elias Monroe, she had returned to work, where Raymond had quietly arranged things so that she and Elias rarely had to interact directly. When they did cross paths, there was a new kind of tension between them, not the anger of betrayal anymore, but something more complex, something that felt like possibility. Elias had kept his word, giving her the space she needed. No pressure, no grand gestures, no manipulation, just a patient presence, waiting for her to decide what came next. It was Lydia who finally broke the stalemate one evening as they sat together in her apartment sharing a simple dinner Nia had prepared. "So," Lydia said, setting down her fork, "are you going to forgive that man of yours, or are you going to keep him dangling forever?" Nia nearly choked on her water. "He's not my man," she protested, "and it's complicated." "Life is complicated, baby girl," Lydia replied, her eyes knowing. "Doesn't mean you have to make it more so by denying what's in your heart." "How can I trust him again?" Nia asked, the question that had been haunting her for weeks finally spoken aloud. "How do I know this isn't just another test?" Lydia considered this, her face thoughtful. "You don't. Not completely. That's the risk of loving someone after they've hurt you. But ask yourself this. Is what you've seen of him lately real? The way he looks at you, the way he's giving you space, the way he helped me without asking for anything in return?" Nia thought about it, about the glimpses of the real Elias she had seen. Vulnerable, honest, no longer hiding behind his walls or his tests. "I think so," she admitted softly. "Then maybe it's time for a leap of faith," Lydia suggested. "Not blindly, not without caution, but a step forward at least." Later that night, as Nia lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she thought about her mother's words. A leap of faith. Was she brave enough to take that risk? To open herself to the possibility of being hurt again? But wasn't that what love was? The courage to be vulnerable, to choose someone despite the risk, to believe in the possibility of happiness even after pain. Decision made, Nia reached for her phone. Elias was in his office, staring unseeing at the spreadsheet on his computer screen, when his phone buzzed with a text message. His heart skipped a beat when he saw Nia's name. "Can we talk? Tomorrow night. The diner where we met." His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hope and anxiety warring within him. Was this the conversation he had been waiting for? Or was Nia finally going to tell him it was over for good? "I'll be there." 8 p.m., he replied. Her response came quickly. 8 p.m. Just you. No driver, no fancy car. Just me, he promised. Setting down his phone, Elias leaned back in his chair, a mix of emotions washing over him. For weeks, he had been giving Nia the space she needed, hoping against hope that she would find it in her heart to forgive him. He had thrown himself into work, into helping Lydia recover, into becoming the kind of man who deserved a second chance. Now the moment of truth was approaching. Tomorrow night, he would face Nia across a table at Maggie's place, the diner where their story had begun, and learn whether that story had any chance of continuing. Whatever happened, Elias had already decided one thing. No more masks, no more walls, no more tests. Just the truth, messy and vulnerable as it might be. The following evening, Nia arrived at Maggie's place early. The familiar bell jingled as she pushed open the door, the smell of coffee and pie bringing back memories of that first night when Elias had walked into her life. Maggie greeted her with a warm hug. "Look at you, all dressed up. Special occasion?" Nia smiled nervously, smoothing down the simple blue dress she had chosen. "Maybe. I'm meeting someone." "That handsome fellow in the suit?" Maggie asked knowingly. "The one who hired you away from us?" "Yes," Nia admitted. "It's complicated." Maggie patted her hand. "The good ones always are, honey. I'll put you in your usual booth." Nia settled into the familiar vinyl booth, memories washing over her. How different her life had been just a few months ago. Working double shifts, struggling to make ends meet, dreaming of someday returning to school. Now here she was, executive assistant to one of the wealthiest men in the city, reconnecting with her long-lost mother. and about to decide the fate of her heart. The bell over the door jingled, and Nia looked up to see Elias entering the diner. He was dressed simply in jeans and a sweater. No suit, no designer labels, just a man coming to meet a woman he cared about. He spotted her immediately, his face lighting up with a smile that made her heart flutter. "You came," Nia said, as he slid into the booth across from her. "I promised I would," Elias replied. "Just me, as requested. I even took the subway." The image of Elias Monroe, billionaire CEO, riding the subway made Nia smile despite her nerves. "How was that experience for you?" "Educational," Elias said with a small laugh. "I think the last time I took the subway was in college." Their conversation was interrupted by Maggie, who came to take their order. "Let me guess," she said to Elias. "Blueberry pie and black coffee." Elias looked surprised. "You remember?" "I remember all my customers," Maggie said with a wink, "especially the ones who tip like you do." After she left, a silence fell between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with all the things that needed to be said. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," Nia began. "I would have waited as long as you needed," Elias replied simply. Nia took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past weeks. About you, about us, about what happened." Elias nodded, his face serious. "And what conclusions have you reached?" "That what you did was wrong," Nia said directly. "Testing people, manipulating situations to expose their weaknesses. It was dishonest and hurtful." "Yes," Elias agreed, not defending himself or making excuses. "It was. But," Nia continued, "I also believe that people can change, that mistakes, even serious ones, don't have to define us forever." She paused, looking into his eyes. "My mother taught me that." Hope flickered across Elias's face. "Does that mean—" "It means I'm willing to try again," Nia said, "not picking up where we left off, but starting fresh, building something new, based on honesty this time." The relief and joy that transformed Elias's expression made Nia's heart swell. He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers, waiting for permission. Nia bridged the gap, lacing her fingers with his. "But I need to know that this is real, Elias, that you've truly left those tests behind, that you're ready to be vulnerable, to trust, to risk getting hurt." "I am," Elias said firmly. "These past weeks without you have shown me what matters. Not money, not power, not protecting myself from every possible hurt. What matters is connection, honesty, love." He squeezed her hand gently. "I love you, Nia Watkins. The real you, not some idealized version I was testing. And I want to spend my life proving that to you, if you'll let me." The simple declaration, spoken in this ordinary diner where their story had begun, brought tears to Nia's eyes. "I love you too," she admitted softly. "Despite everything, despite how we started, I love you." Their moment was interrupted by Maggie returning with their pie and coffee. She took one look at their joined hands and smiled knowingly. "About time," she said, setting down their order. "You two were meant for each other. I could see it that very first night." After she left, Elias looked at Nia curiously. "Did everyone know how I felt before I did?" "Apparently," Nia said with a small laugh. "My mother said the same thing." "Speaking of your mother," Elias said, "how is she doing?" "I've been getting updates from the doctor, but I haven't wanted to intrude." "She's doing much better," Nia replied, touched by his continued concern. "The doctor says she can start looking for work soon. Light duties at first." "Actually, I might have a solution for that," Elias said hesitantly. "If you think she'd be interested, the Monroe Foundation is looking for someone to coordinate our arts education program for underprivileged youth. Given her background in music, she might be a good fit." Nia looked at him searchingly. "Is this another test? To see if I'll take advantage of your generosity for my family?" Elias shook his head. "No more tests, Nia. I promise. This is just me trying to help someone important to you. If she's not interested, or if you're not comfortable with it, we'll forget I mentioned it." Nia studied his face, seeing only sincerity there. "I'll talk to her about it," she said finally. "But Elias, you can't solve everything with money and connections. Some things take time, hard work, emotional investment." "I know," Elias acknowledged, "and I'm ready for that work, Nia. All of it." As they finished their pie and coffee, the conversation flowed more easily, the tension between them gradually dissolving. They talked about work, about Lydia's recovery, about the future, a future they both now dared to imagine might include each other. When they finally left the diner, Elias walked Nia to her car. Before she got in, he took both her hands in his. "Can I see you again tomorrow?" he asked, his voice hopeful. "Maybe dinner at my place? I promise to cook it myself, no chefs, no staff." Nia raised an eyebrow. "You can cook." "I'm learning," Elias admitted with a sheepish smile. "I've been taking lessons. It might not be edible, but it will be honest." The simple admission that he was learning to do something as ordinary as cooking touched Nia deeply. This was Elias stepping out of his privileged bubble, making an effort to connect with her world. "I'd like that," she said softly. As they said goodnight, Elias leaned down and kissed her cheek gently, a promise of more to come. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving us another chance." Driving home, Nia felt lighter than she had in weeks. There were still challenges ahead, still trust to rebuild and wounds to heal, but for the first time she truly believed that she and Elias could build something real together, something based not on tests or deception, but on honesty and mutual respect. What she didn't know was that their newfound happiness was about to face its greatest challenge yet. The dinner at Elias's penthouse the following evening was both a disaster and a triumph. The disaster was the meal itself. Elias's attempts at cooking resulted in overcooked pasta and a sauce that bore little resemblance to anything Italian. The triumph was in the laughter they shared over the failed meal, in the pizza they ordered instead, in the walls that continued to fall between them. For the first time, Nia saw Elias's penthouse not as a showplace of wealth, but as the somewhat lonely space it really was. Few personal touches, no family photos, nothing that spoke of the man who lived there. "This place doesn't feel like you," she observed as they sat on his terrace. The city lights spread out below them. Elias looked around thoughtfully. "It never really has," he admitted. "It was designed to impress, not to be a home." "What would make it feel like home to you?" Nia asked. Elias considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Books that aren't just for show, photos of people I care about, comfortable furniture you can actually relax on." He glanced at her, his eyes warm. "You, maybe. Your presence makes any place feel more like home." The simple admission, so honest and vulnerable, made Nia's heart swell. This was the real Elias, the man behind the billionaire facade, the man she was falling more in love with each day. As they sat together, talking about everything and nothing, Nia felt the last of her reservations melting away. This felt right, felt real, in a way that nothing in her life had for a very long time. What she didn't know was that across town, forces were already in motion that would test their newfound happiness in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The storm broke 3 days later. Nia was at her desk, going through Elias's schedule for an upcoming business trip to Tokyo, when Raymond appeared at her door, his face grave. "Nia, you need to see this," he said, handing her a tablet. On the screen was a tabloid website, its headline screaming in bold letters, "Billionaire's sick game, Elias Monroe's secret wife tests exposed." Beneath the headline was a photo of Elias, and next to it, photos of several women, including Nia. The article detailed Elias's systematic testing of potential partners, complete with quotes from insider sources, and details that could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge of his methods. Nia felt the blood drain from her face. "Who did this?" she whispered. "We don't know yet," Raymond replied, his voice tight with anger. "But the damage is already spreading. Every major news outlet has picked it up. Social media is exploding. The board is calling an emergency meeting. And," he hesitated. "And what?" Nia pressed. "And several of the women named in the article are threatening lawsuits. They're claiming invasion of privacy, emotional distress, fraud." Nia closed her eyes, trying to process the catastrophe unfolding before her. Just when she and Elias had found their way back to each other, just when she had decided to trust him again, this happened. "Where is Elias?" she asked, opening her eyes. "In his office. He's been on the phone with the legal team all morning." Raymond's expression softened. "He asked for you, Nia. Said you're the only person he wants to see right now." When Nia entered Elias's office, she found him standing at the window, his back to the door, tension evident in every line of his body. He turned at the sound of her entry, his face haggard with stress and lack of sleep. "Nia," he said, relief washing over his features. "You're here." "Of course I'm here," she replied, closing the door behind her. "Did you think I wouldn't be?" "I wouldn't have blamed you for running as far and fast as you could," Elias said, his voice rough. "This is exactly what you feared. Your privacy violated, your name dragged through the mud because of me." Nia moved closer, taking his hands in hers. "We'll deal with this together," she said firmly. "But first, Tell me what happened. Who did this? Elias ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in the gesture. We think it was Alexander, my brother. He's the only one besides Raymond who knew about the tests, and he's been increasingly resentful of my success, my control of the company. But why now? Nia asked. Why would he do this to you now? Because I was happy, Elias said simply. Because he saw that I had found something real with you, something he's never had. And because I recently blocked his attempt to sell off a division of the company that would have made him millions, but cost hundreds of people their jobs. The explanation made a sad kind of sense. Nia had met Alexander briefly at a company function, a colder, harder version of Elias, with none of the warmth or integrity that redeemed his brother's flaws. What happens now? She asked. Elias sighed heavily. The board meeting is in an hour. They'll want damage control, possibly my resignation. The lawyers are already working on settlements for the women who are threatening to sue, and the PR team is crafting a statement that makes me sound less like a calculating sociopath and more like a misguided man with trust issues. And us? Nia asked softly. What happens to us? Elias looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and regret. That's up to you, Nia. I would understand if you wanted to distance yourself from this mess, from me. Your reputation, your privacy. Stop, Nia interrupted firmly. I didn't give you a second chance just to walk away at the first sign of trouble. Yes, this is a mess. Yes, it's going to be painful and public and embarrassing, but we'll face it together. The relief that washed over Elias's face was almost painful to witness. He pulled Nia into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. I don't deserve you, he whispered against her hair. Probably not, Nia agreed with a small smile. But you're stuck with me anyway. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of crisis management. The board stopped short of demanding Elias's resignation, but insisted on a public apology and a significant donation to women's empowerment organizations. The lawsuits were settled quietly, with generous compensation for the women involved, and Alexander, confronted with evidence of his betrayal, resigned from the company and disappeared to his villa in the south of France. Through it all, Nia remained steadfastly by Elias's side, weathering the storm of public opinion, the invasive questions from reporters, the sidelong glances from colleagues who had read the tabloid accounts. It was a trial by fire for their relationship, testing the fragile trust they had begun to rebuild. But instead of driving them apart, the crisis brought them closer together. For the first time in his life, Elias wasn't facing adversity alone. He had someone who believed in him, who saw beyond his mistakes to the man he was trying to become. One evening, about a month after the scandal broke, Elias and Nia were having dinner at her apartment, a simple meal she had cooked, far from the luxury restaurants they had once frequented. The media frenzy had finally begun to die down, replaced by newer, more exciting scandals. I've been thinking, Elias said as they sat together on her small sofa, a glass of wine in hand. About what happens next. What do you mean? Nia asked. This whole experience has made me reevaluate what's important, Elias explained. The company, the money, the power, none of it means anything without someone to share it with, without purpose. Nia studied his face, noting the changes of the past weeks. The lines of stress, yes, but also a new kind of peace, as if he had finally stopped running from something. And what have you decided is important? She asked. You, Elias said simply. Us building something real together, and using what I have, my resources, my influence, to make a difference, not just accumulate more wealth. He set down his wine glass and took her hands in his. I'm restructuring the company, putting more resources into the foundation, focusing on education initiatives, affordable housing, the things that might have helped you and your mother all those years ago. Nia felt tears prick at her eyes, moved by his words. This was the man she had glimpsed from the beginning, the one hidden beneath layers of fear and protective walls, a man with the capacity for great compassion, great love. I'm proud of you, she said softly, for turning this crisis into an opportunity for growth. I couldn't have done it without you, Elias replied. You saw something in me worth saving, even when I was at my worst. You gave me a reason to be better. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. There's something else I wanted to talk to you about. Nia's heart skipped a beat as he pulled out a small velvet box. Elias, this isn't a proposal, he said quickly. Not yet. We've been through too much, too fast. We both need time to heal, to build our relationship on stronger foundations. He opened the box to reveal not an engagement ring, but a simple silver key. What is this? Nia asked, confused. A key to my heart, Elias said with a small smile, metaphorically speaking, but also practically a key to a new place I've bought. A real home, not a showcase penthouse. Something warm, something ours if you want it to be. Nia stared at the key, emotions washing over her. You want us to live together? Eventually, Elias nodded. When you're ready. I'm not rushing you, Nia. I just wanted you to know that I'm all in, that I'm planning for a future with you, whatever form that takes. The gesture, so thoughtful, so respectful of her need for time and space, touched Nia deeply. This was love, she realized. Not the grand passion of romantic movies, but something quieter and more enduring. A choice made daily, a commitment to building something together, step by patient step. I'd like to see this place, she said, taking the key from the box. And yes, someday, I think I'd like to share a home with you. But Elias, I need you to understand something important. What's that? He asked, his expression serious. I don't need fancy houses or expensive gifts. I don't need to be rescued or taken care of. What I need is a partner, someone who sees me as an equal, who respects my independence even as we build a life together. Elias nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. That's what I want too, Nia. A true partnership. Not me taking care of you or you fixing me. Just two people choosing each other, day after day. As he leaned in to kiss her, Nia felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged, not because Elias had passed some test, not because she had forgiven his mistakes, but because together they were becoming better versions of themselves. 3 months later, Nia stood in the kitchen of their new home, a warm, comfortable brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, far from the glittering towers of Elias's former life. She was preparing dinner, something she enjoyed doing now that she had a kitchen big enough to really cook in. Her life had changed dramatically in the year since Elias had walked into Maggie's place. She had returned to school, finishing her degree in early childhood education with Elias's encouragement. She had helped Lydia settle into her new role at the Monroe Foundation, where her mother's talent for music and her understanding of hardship made her uniquely qualified to work with underprivileged youth. And she had watched as Elias transformed, not overnight, but gradually, thoughtfully, into the man she had always glimpsed beneath his walls. He still ran Monroe Enterprises, but with a new focus on ethical business practices and social responsibility. He had simplified his life, shed the trappings of wealth that had never really made him happy. Most importantly, he had learned to trust, to be vulnerable, to let her see all of him, the good and the bad, the strength and the weakness. The sound of the front door opening pulled Nia from her thoughts. Elias appeared in the kitchen doorway, a smile lighting up his face at the sight of her. Something smells amazing, he said, crossing to kiss her hello. Just a simple pasta, Nia replied. How was your meeting with the education board? Productive, Elias said, removing his jacket. They're excited about the scholarship program, 20 full rides for foster kids who want to pursue higher education. The pride in his voice made Nia's heart swell. This was the project closest to Elias's heart, creating opportunities for young people who, like Nia, had faced obstacles to education due to financial hardship. That's wonderful, she said. Grandma Rose would have loved this program. She always said education was the key to changing your life. She was a wise woman, Elias agreed, wrapping his arms around Nia from behind as she stirred the sauce. I wish I could have met her. She would have seen right through you, Nia said with a small laugh. All your tests and walls wouldn't have fooled her for a minute. Like grandmother, like granddaughter, Elias murmured, kissing her neck. You saw through me too, eventually. As they set the table together, a simple domestic task that still felt new and precious, Elias seemed unusually quiet, lost in thought. Everything okay? Nia asked as they sat down to eat. Perfect, Elias assured her. I was just thinking about how much my life has changed in a year, how much I've changed. For the better, I hope, Nia said, watching him curiously. Definitely for the better, Elias agreed. I was so afraid of being hurt again that I nearly missed out on the best thing that ever happened to me. You. He reached across the table to take her hand. Which is why I was wondering if you'd be willing to take a drive with me after dinner. There's somewhere I'd like to go. Okay, Nia agreed, intrigued by the hint of nervousness in his voice. Where are we going? It's a surprise, Elias said with a small smile, but I think you'll like it. After dinner, they got into Elias's car. No longer the flashy sports car of his former life, but a practical, comfortable sedan. As they drove through the evening streets, Nia tried to guess their destination, but Elias remained mysteriously silent. When they pulled up in front of Maggie's place, Nia turned to him in surprise. "The diner. This is your surprise?" "It seemed appropriate," Elias said, a hint of nervousness in his smile. "This is where our story began, after all." Inside, the diner was nearly empty, the late hour bringing only a few night owls seeking coffee and pie. Maggie greeted them warmly, leading them to the same booth where they had first met, where they had later reconnected after their separation. "What can I get you two lovebirds?" she asked with a knowing smile. "Blueberry pie and coffee, please," Elias requested, "for both of us." After Maggie left, Elias reached across the table to take Nia's hands in his. "Do you remember the first night we met?" he asked. "You were standing right there, coffee pot in hand, asking if I wanted something to drink while I decided." Nia smiled at the memory. "You looked so out of place in your expensive suit. I remember thinking you must be lost." "I was," Elias said softly. "More than you knew. Lost and alone, and so afraid of being hurt that I had built a fortress around my heart. And then there you were with your kind eyes and your genuine smile, and something inside me recognized you, not as the next test subject, but as the person who might finally teach me what love really is." Nia felt her heart beating faster at the intensity in his eyes, the raw emotion in his voice. "Elias, what's going on?" Instead of answering, he slid out of the booth and, to her utter shock, knelt on one knee beside the table. The few other customers in the diner fell silent, all eyes turning toward them. "Nia Watkins," Elias said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "When I walked into this diner a year ago, I was a man who thought he had everything but really had nothing that mattered. You changed that. You saw through my walls, challenged my fears, and showed me what real love looks like. Not a test to be passed or failed, but a choice made every day." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "I'm not asking you to marry me because you passed some test. I'm asking because you changed everything. Because I love you, all of you, and I want to spend the rest of my life being the man you deserve. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Nia's eyes as she looked at Elias, not the billionaire in an expensive suit, but a man in simple clothes, on his knee in a diner, offering her his heart without reservation. "Yes," she whispered, her voice catching. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Elias slipped the ring onto her finger, the diner erupted in applause and cheers. Maggie appeared with their pie and coffee, tears streaming down her own cheeks. "About time," she said, setting down their order. "I knew from that first night you two were meant for each other." After the excitement died down and the other customers returned to their own conversations, Nia looked at the ring on her finger, elegant but not ostentatious, perfectly suited to her taste. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I had help choosing it," Elias admitted. "Lydia has excellent taste." The revelation that he had consulted her mother touched Nia deeply. "You asked her permission?" "I did," Elias nodded. "She said yes, but with conditions. That I always respect your independence, that I never try to change you, and that I make you as happy as you make me. I promise to spend the rest of my life trying." Nia leaned across the table to kiss him, not caring who was watching. "Now you're finally telling the truth," she whispered against his lips. And in that moment, in that ordinary diner where their extraordinary journey had begun, Nia knew that they had both passed the real test. Not Elias's manipulative scenarios, but life's deeper challenge to find love that lasts beyond hurt, beyond mistakes, beyond fear. A love built not on perfection but on forgiveness, not on wealth or status, but on seeing and being seen, truly and completely. Not on passing tests, but on choosing each other day after day, in all the messy, beautiful reality of what it means to be human. As they sat together, planning their future over blueberry pie and coffee, Nia thought about the long, winding path that had brought them here, from a chance meeting on a rainy night to this moment of perfect clarity, from mistrust to deep understanding, from loneliness to belonging. The 10th test had become something neither of them could have anticipated, not an evaluation of worthiness, but a journey of transformation. And in the end, they had both passed, not because they were perfect, but because they had found the courage to be real with each other, to choose love over fear, trust over protection, honesty over walls. And that, Nia realized as she looked at the man who would soon be her husband, was the greatest test of all. 6 months later, Nia stood in a small garden overlooking the ocean, a simple white dress flowing around her as a gentle breeze carried the scent of flowers. Before her stood Elias, handsome in a light suit, his eyes never leaving hers as they exchanged vows. It was a small wedding, just close friends and family. Lydia was there, healthy and vibrant, proudly serving as Nia's matron of honor. Raymond and Margaret sat in the front row, beaming with approval. Even Mr. Jenkins from the diner had come, escorted by Maggie herself. "I, Elias Monroe, take you, Nia Watkins, to be my wife," Elias said, his voice strong and clear. "Not because you passed any test, but because you showed me what love really is. I promise to choose you every day, to be honest with you always, to build a life of meaning with you, and to never again hide behind walls or fear." Tears shimmered in Nia's eyes as she responded, "I, Nia Watkins, take you, Elias Monroe, to be my husband. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. I promise to choose you every day to be your partner in all things, to build a home and a life filled with purpose, and to never stop believing in the person you are becoming." As they exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, Nia felt a sense of completion, of rightness. They had overcome so much to reach this moment: her abandonment issues, his fear of vulnerability, the public scandal, the painful truths they had faced together. But through it all, they had found each other. Not in the artificial scenario of Elias's tests, but in the real-world challenges that had forced them both to grow, to trust, to become more fully themselves. At the reception, held in the garden of the beach house where Nia had once found Elias at his lowest point, Lydia raised her glass for a toast. "To Nia and Elias," she said, her voice carrying across the gathering. "Two people who prove that it's never too late for second chances. Who remind us that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone who helps you become the best version of yourself." As applause rang out, Elias leaned close to whisper in Nia's ear, "She's right, you know, you make me better every day." "We make each other better," Nia corrected with a smile. "That's what partnership is all about." Later, as they danced under the stars, Nia rested her head against Elias's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. So much had changed in the year and a half since he had walked into Maggie's place. She had gone from a struggling waitress to a college graduate with a promising career in early childhood education. She had reconnected with her mother, healing wounds that had festered for 15 years, and she had found love with a man who had seen her, truly seen her from that very first night. Elias, too, had transformed, from a guarded, mistrustful man who tested people like products to be evaluated, to someone capable of deep vulnerability and authentic connection. He still ran his company, still possessed wealth and power, but he wore it differently now, with humility, with purpose, with a desire to make a difference, rather than simply accumulate more. "What are you thinking about?" Elias asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "About how far we've come," Nia replied, "about all the twists and turns that led us here." "Any regrets?" he asked, a hint of his old insecurity showing through. Nia looked up at him, at the man who had become her husband, her partner, her home. "Not one," she said with complete conviction. "Every step, every mistake, every test, they all led us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." As the night deepened around them, stars shimmering like diamonds above the ocean, Nia and Elias continued to dance, their bodies moving in perfect harmony. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love over fear, honesty over walls, forgiveness over resentment, who had in the end passed the most important test of all, not Elias's contrived scenarios, but life's deeper challenge to find love that endures, love that sees past mistakes to the person beneath, love that chooses again and again to believe in possibility. For Nia Watkins and Elias Monroe, the journey had just begun. But with each step, each day, each choice to be real with each other, they were building something that would last long after the tests were forgotten. Something true, something enduring, something neither of them had dared to hope for until they found each other. A love strong enough to heal the past and build a future together. The end.